Hey guys, just want to say thanks for tuning in today. Smash that subscribe button if you're new here, and as always, please like this video if you enjoy the stories. Now, let's get into the stories.
I almost didn't go on that date, and not in the dramatic way people say that after something bad happens. I mean, I was literally sitting on my bed with one shoe on, scrolling for a reason to cancel, feeling that dull pressure in my chest, like I was about to waste another night pretending to be interesting. Something about her profile felt slightly off, not scary, just like it was made by someone who studied how people are supposed to look online instead of just being one. I told myself I was overthinking it, that I always do that, and that the worst case was just an awkward meal and a story to laugh about later. The plates we picked was this weird little food hall near the river, all concrete floors and hanging lights that buzzed a bit too loud. It smelled like grease and sweet bread at the same time. The kind of place that wants to look casual, but is clearly trying very hard. I got there early and stood around pretending to check my phone, watching people walk by and wondering which one of them was her. When she showed up, I recognized her immediately, not because she looked exactly like her pictures, but because she didn't quite. Same face, same hair, but her eyes were sharper, like she was constantly measuring the space around her. We grabbed a table near one of the stalls and sat down. Everything felt normal at first, painfully normal. My brain kept trying to relax, telling me this was fine. This was how dates go. Then came the moment that still feels heavy when I think about it. She leaned forward, pointed at the sign above one of the stalls, and said she couldn't see the menu from where she was sitting. Before I could even react, she asked if she could borrow my phone to check it online since hers was dying. I handed it to her without thinking. I wish I could say I hesitated or that some warning bell went off in my head, but it didn't. It felt like the most boring, harmless request in the world. She took my phone, held it with both hands, and leaned back in her chair. Her thumbs moved quickly, way quicker than someone just scrolling through a menu. I noticed that, but again, I ignored it. I didn't want to be that guy who gets suspicious over nothing. She gave my phone back after maybe 20 seconds and smiled like everything was fine. I glanced at the screen out of habit, expecting to see some food website pulled up. Instead, it was locked. No open tabs. Nothing. I shrugged it off, slipped it into my pocket, and we ordered food. The rest of the date felt slightly off, like a radio station that almost comes in clear but never fully does. She laughed at moments that didn't feel like jokes and went quiet when I expected her to react. Still, nothing outright wrong happened. We sat there longer than we should have, and eventually we went our separate ways outside the building. She walked off toward the parking lot without looking back. I stood there for a second, breathing in the cold air, feeling relieved it was over. I pulled my phone out to check the time and saw a new message notification. It wasn't sent to me, it was sent for me. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like I missed a step on stairs. The message preview showed my own number at the top, with text underneath that I didn't remember typing. It was a short message, casual, like something I might send to a friend. It talked about meeting later that night, about knowing a quiet spot, about not telling anyone. My hands started sweating as I opened the thread. There were more messages, not just one. A whole back and forth, all sent while my phone was in her hands. Whoever was on the other end responded like this was the first time they had talked. The tone was familiar, comfortable. They confirmed a time and a location on the edge of town, somewhere I had never been but vaguely recognized from the name. The last message, the one sent from my phone, said I would be there and that I was coming alone. I stood there staring at the screen while people brushed past me, laughing, talking, living normal lives. My brain tried to rationalize it, telling me it was a prank, a misunderstanding, anything that didn't involve what I was actually thinking. I scrolled up to see the contact name. It wasn't saved, just a number. No profile picture, no clues. I thought about texting back to cancel to explain, but something stopped me. Maybe fear, maybe curiosity, maybe the way my fingers felt stiff and slow. Instead, I locked my phone and shoved it into my pocket like that could make the problem disappear. I walked home with my head down, replaying every second of the date, trying to remember exactly what she did on my phone. I kept seeing her thumbs moving fast and confident, like she knew exactly where to tap. When I got back to my place, the silence felt wrong. The walls felt closer than usual. I checked my phone again. Another message had come in. It asked if I was still on for later. No name, just the number. I didn't answer. I put my phone face down on the table and paced around, my thoughts racing in messy circles. I checked my locks twice, then 3 times. Part of me wanted to block the number and forget the whole thing. Another part kept thinking about how easily she had done it, how she didn't even try to hide it, how she handed my phone back like nothing had happened. I realized something that made my chest tighten. She didn't need my permission. She already had what she wanted. She had my number, my messages, my way in. Around the time the messages said I was supposed to leave, my phone buzzed again. This time it was the text. It was a location pin, the same place mentioned earlier. I felt sick. I imagined someone standing there, checking their phone, waiting for me, convinced I was on my way. I imagined what they thought they were meeting. I imagined what would happen when I didn't show up. I turned my phone off completely and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. Minutes passed, then more. I started to feel stupid for panicking. But nothing would happen. Maybe this was all some elaborate joke that would end with an awkward explanation. Then there was a knock on my door. Not a polite knock, not loud either. Just firm, slow taps, like whoever it was knew exactly how hard to hit the wood. My heart slammed against my ribs. I didn't move. The knocking stopped. I listened, holding my breath, counting seconds in my head. Then my phone, still off, lit up with the screen glow from the table. It shouldn't have. I must not have turned it off all the way. A new message came through. It said they were outside and that they could see my light. I froze. My place isn't visible from the street. You have to walk down a narrow path to get to my door. No one could see inside unless they were already close. My body felt heavy, like my muscles had forgotten how to work. The knocking came back, closer this time, like the sound was inside my head. I didn't answer. I didn't make a sound. After what felt like forever, it stopped. Footsteps moved away, slow and unhurried. I waited until my legs started to ache before I dared to move again. I checked the message thread. There were several new ones, all sent within minutes. Confusion. Irritation. Then something colder. It said I was supposed to back out and that someone had vouched for me. I knew then that this wasn't random. She had set this up before she'd ever met me. I was just the number she needed that night, the phone she borrowed, the face she could point to later if things went wrong. I blocked the number, changed my settings, and stayed awake until the sun came up, jumping at every sound. I'd never heard from her again. Her profile disappeared a few days later. No explanation. No closure. Sometimes I still think about how easy it was for her, how one small polite moment turned into something that followed me home. Every time someone asks to borrow my phone now, my stomach twists before my brain can even answer. I didn't think a coffee place could make me feel unsafe, but that night proved me wrong fast. It started with that jittery excitement I always get before meeting someone new, the kind that feels like nerves mixed with boredom, like I was hoping something interesting would happen, but also scared it would. I remember checking my reflection in the dark window of the bus, thinking I looked younger than I actually was, like a kid pretending to be an adult for the evening. The place we picked was a late-night cafe near a strip of half-closed shops, one of those areas that looks busy during the day and slightly forgotten after sunset. When I walked in, the smell of burnt coffee and sugar hit me right away. The lights were warm but uneven, some corners brighter than others, and there was soft music playing that didn't quite cover the sound of people talking. He was already there, standing near the counter, looking taller than I expected and a little stiff, like he didn't know what to do with his arms. We didn't hug or anything like that, just that awkward half step toward each other and then stopping. It felt normal, boring even, and that almost made me relax. Before I could even look around for a seat, he pointed toward the far back of the room. There was a table tucked into the corner, half hidden by a tall plant and a fake bookshelf. I remember thinking it was a weird choice because there were plenty of open tables closer to the counter, but I followed him anyway. I didn't want to make a big deal out of seating on a first date. We sat down, and the chair felt colder than the others, like it hadn't been used in a while. From that corner, the cafe felt different. The noise faded into a low hum, and the lights didn't reach us properly. I could see most of the room if I leaned forward, but if I sat back, it was like we weren't even there. I noticed he kept glancing around, not at people, but at the ceiling and the walls. His eyes paused on the small black camera above the counter, then another near the door. He looked satisfied, like he had confirmed something. When I asked why he picked this spot, he didn't hesitate. He leaned in slightly and admitted it was because the cameras didn't reach this table. He said it casually, like it was a fun fact about the cafe, something clever he had noticed before. My stomach tightened instantly. I laughed it off at first, because that's what I do when something feels off. But my brain was already racing, replaying his words over and over. I tried to focus on other things. The chipped edge of the table, the way the fake plant had dust on its leaves, the sound of the espresso machine hissing in the distance. He talked a lot, mostly about random stuff that didn't really connect. His job, some complaints about people he used to know, how he hated being watched. That last part came up more than once. Every time he mentioned it, he glanced up again, like he expected the ceiling to be listening. I started to feel boxed in, not physically, but mentally. The back corner felt like a pocket where time moved slower. I checked my phone under the table, pretending to scroll, just to see the time and remind myself that I wasn't stuck there forever. When I looked up, he was watching me, not in a flirty way, more like he was taking inventory. His eyes flicked from my face to my hands, then back again. The more he talked, the more little things piled up. He mentioned how easy it was to learn a place once you sat in it long enough. How staff never noticed certain tables. How people assumed cameras saw everything, even when they didn't. He said it like it was funny, like he was proud of noticing gaps other people missed. My heart started beating harder, and I realized I hadn't taken a full breath in a while. I thought about leaving, but I didn't want to make it obvious. The exit felt far away from that corner, even though it wasn't. I kept telling myself I was overreacting. Lots of people say weird things. Lots of first dates are awkward. But there was something about how calm he was, how prepared, like he had thought about this exact moment before I ever walked in. Then he leaned back in his chair and looked around one more time. He said that nothing bad ever happened at this table because no one could prove anything did. That sentence hit me harder than anything else he said. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was flat, like a statement he believed deeply. My skin crawled, and I felt that heavy drop in my stomach that tells me something is really wrong. I shifted in my seat and accidentally bumped my bag. The sound seemed too loud in that quiet corner. He flinched just a little, then smiled like he had. I realized then that he was controlling the space. The seating, the conversation, the way time felt stretched. I was reacting. He was planning. I told him I needed to use the bathroom and stood up before he could respond. My legs felt weak as I walked past the other tables, back into the brighter part of the cafe. Everything looked different from there. Safer, louder, real. I locked myself in a bathroom stall and leaned against the door, breathing fast, staring at the scratched metal like it could ground me. I checked my phone again, considering calling someone, anyone, but I didn't want to draw attention. When I came back out, I didn't go straight to the table. I stood near the counter instead, pretending to read the menu board even though I wasn't reading it at all. I could see him from there, still sitting in the corner, still watching the room. When his eyes found me, his expression changed. Not angry, not scared, annoyed, like I had stepped off a path he expected me to stay on. I walked back, told him I wasn't feeling great, and said I needed to head out. He didn't argue. That scared me more than if he had. He just nodded slowly, stood up, and followed me toward the door, staying a step behind the whole time. I felt exposed walking past the cameras, like I was finally back in their view, and he knew it. Outside, the night air felt sharp and cold, but it was a relief. I walked faster than necessary, not looking back until I reached the bus stop. When I did glance over my shoulder, he was still standing just outside the cafe, watching people go in and out, not looking for me anymore. It was like I had already disappeared to him. Later that night, sitting in my room, I kept thinking about that corner. How intentional it felt. How many times he had probably sat there before. How many people might have brushed off his comments the way I almost did. Nothing happened to me beyond fear, and that almost made it worse. There was no big moment, no clear line crossed, just the weight of knowing what could have. I blocked him on everything and never went back to that cafe. Sometimes when I walk into new places now, I look for the cameras first. Not because I want to avoid them, but because I want to know they are there. Some corners aren't empty by accident. I knew something was wrong before I could even explain why, like that feeling you get when you wake up too early and the house feels unfamiliar for a second. I was tying my shoes, phone face down on the bed, telling myself this was just another first date and I was being dramatic. I had almost canceled twice that afternoon, not because of fear, but because I was tired. Tired of introductions, tired of pretending my past did trail behind me like loose string. I went anyway because staying home felt worse. We met at a small late afternoon diner near the edge of town, the kind with sticky tables and a faded mural on one wall that no one ever looks at anymore. It wasn't trendy or romantic, which I liked. It felt neutral, like a place where nothing important should happen. When I walked in, she was already sitting in a booth near the window, scrolling on her phone, legs tucked under the table. She looked normal. Too normal. Like someone I could have gone to school with or passed in a hallway 100 times without noticing. We ordered food, then slid into that familiar first date rhythm. Talking about work, complaining about traffic, laughing at things that didn't matter. I started to relax. I remember thinking that maybe this would be easy, maybe for once nothing strange would happen. The diner hummed around us, forks clinking, a kid crying somewhere behind me, the smell of fries hanging in the air. It grounded me. Then she casually brought up my last relationship. Not in a vague way, not like she was guessing. She mentioned specific details. How long it lasted, the way it ended, even the city my ex moved to afterward. Things I had never posted anywhere. Things I never shared on dating apps. I froze for half a second, my brain scrambling to catch up. I laughed it off at first, assuming she must have misunderstood something I said earlier. But the more she talked, the clearer it became that she was guessing it all. I asked how she knew all that. I didn't mean it aggressively. It came out confused, almost amused. Her reaction was immediate and sharp. Her face changed, like a switch flipped. She stiffened, eyes narrowing, shoulders pulling in. The easy mood vanished in a breath. She accused me of being defensive, of acting like she did something wrong. The sudden shift made my chest feel tight. She said everyone looks people up before meeting. She said it like it was obvious, like I was a weird one for questioning it. But this wasn't just scrolling through public profiles. This was deeper. She knew arguments I had forgotten about. She knew timelines that only existed in private messages and late-night talks. I felt exposed, like she had been standing behind me for years, quietly taking notes. I tried to change the subject, steering the conversation back to safe ground, but she kept circling back. Every time I mentioned something about myself, she nodded like it confirmed something she already believed. It was like I was catching up to my own story, hearing it told by someone else who felt weirdly entitled to it. I started noticing other things then. How she watched my reactions more than my face. How she smiled when I looked uncomfortable, like it proved she was right about something. She mentioned places I used to go with my ex, not directly, but enough that I recognized them. My hands felt clammy against the table, and I wiped them on my jeans without thinking. The diner suddenly felt too open and too closed at the same time. People were everywhere, but none of them felt close enough to help. I checked my phone, not because I needed to, but because it made me feel less trapped. She noticed immediately. Her tone shifted again, annoyed now, like I was breaking some unspoken rule. She accused me of hiding things, of pretending to be someone I wasn't. The irony of it hit me so hard I almost laughed. She was the one who knew too much, who crossed lines before we even sat down, and somehow I was the one being questioned. I realized then that this wasn't about curiosity. It was about control, about showing me that she already had access to parts of me I thought were private. I thought about my ex, about how carefully I had tried to move on, how I avoided talking about that part of my life because it still felt raw. Hearing it laid out so casually by someone new made my stomach churn. It felt like a wound being poked by a stranger who didn't care if it hurt. I told her I needed some air and slid out of the booth. She rolled her eyes, clearly irritated like I was being dramatic again. Outside, the sky was dimming, that weird blue-gray color before evening fully sets in. I stood there for a minute, breathing in exhaust and fried food smell, trying to steady myself. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message from her. Already. I didn't open it. I didn't want to see what she thought I owed her. When I went back inside, I told her I was done, and that this wasn't working. She scoffed, saying I couldn't handle honesty. The words stuck with me, not because they were true, but because she believed they were. I paid my part and walked out without looking back. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through water. The whole drive home, my mind replayed everything she said, lining it up with memories, realizing how accurate it all was. I kept asking myself how she got that information, how deep she went, how long she had been digging before we ever matched. Later that night, curiosity got the better of me. I searched her name online. I didn't find much at first. Then I noticed mutual connections, people from my past, people I had talked to in years. I clicked through profiles, following threads backward until it clicked. She had known someone close to my ex. Not a friend, not exactly. Someone who had watched from the sidelines, collecting stories, filling in gaps with assumptions. It didn't make it better. If anything, it made it worse. This wasn't random. I was unlucky. I was selected. She didn't want to know me. She wanted to confront a version of me she had already built in her head, shaped by secondhand bitterness and unfinished conversations. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Then another. I blocked her number without reading them. I blocked her on every app I could think of. I sat on my couch in the dark, feeling that strange mix of relief and violation. Nothing physically bad happened. No yelling, no scene. Just the quiet horror of realizing how porous your life can be if someone wants in badly enough. The next few days, I kept expecting to hear from her again. A new number. A fake account. Nothing came. The silence did comfort me. It just made me more aware of how much she already knew, how much she could still be holding on to. Sometimes I catch myself scanning faces in public, wondering who knows my story without my permission. That date didn't end with a bang or a dramatic moment. It ended with me realizing that privacy isn't something you lose all at once. Sometimes it's taken piece by piece, then handed back to you by a stranger who thinks they own it. I almost didn't notice the feeling at first, and that scares me more than what happened later. It was the kind of night where everything felt slightly unreal, like I was watching myself from a few feet away. I remember standing in my bathroom, fixing my hair for way too long, telling myself I was overthinking again. My phone was buzzing with notifications from friends asking where I was going, who I was meeting, doing the usual check and stuff. I brushed it off and told myself I was grown enough to handle one simple date. We met at a small bar tucked between a gym and a closed thrift store, the kind of place that pretends to be relaxed but keeps the lights low enough that you can't see corners clearly. The sign outside flickered, and the door stuck a little when I pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with citrus cleaner and old wood. Music played from speakers mounted too high, bass heavy and uneven. It wasn't crowded, which should have been a good thing, but it just made every movement feel louder. He was already there, leaning against the bar, scrolling on his phone. He looked confident in a quiet way, like someone who expects things to go smoothly because they usually do. We didn't hug or touch or anything like that. We just existed next to each other for a second before sitting down at a small round table near the wall. I noticed right away that he picked the spot, positioning us so his back was to the room and I faced it. I told myself that was nothing. Lots of people have seating habits. Before I even looked at the menu, he waved the bartender over. I was still scanning the drink list in my head when the bartender placed a glass in front of me. It was already poured, sweating slightly against the table, a slice of fruit floating near the rim. I looked at it confused and looked at him. He had ordered it for me. No asking, no checking. Just decided. It threw me off, but not enough to immediately react. I smiled out of reflex, that automatic thing I do when I don't want to seem difficult. He looked pleased, like he had done something right. I picked up the glass, more out of habit than intention, and smelled it. Something about it felt wrong. Not obviously wrong, just unfamiliar, stronger than I expected. I set it back down. I told him I didn't want it. I said it casually like it wasn't a big deal. His reaction was instant. His posture stiffened, and his face tightened in a way that didn't match the situation at all. The easy confidence cracked, replaced by irritation that felt way too intense for such a small thing. He leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on the glass, then on me. He started pushing. Not physically, but socially. Little signals that I was being rude, ungrateful, dramatic. He kept glancing at the drink like it was an extension of himself. I felt that familiar pressure to just go along with it, to take a sip and smooth everything over. I hate that I even considered it. The longer I refused, the more annoyed he became. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was controlled, measured. That made it worse. He talked about how he picked it specially, how he was sure I would like it, how it was a waste to let it sit there. Each word felt like it was building towards something else, something unspoken. My heart started racing, and I became very aware of how close the table was to the wall, how my chair couldn't move back very far. I pushed the glass a little farther away from me. The condensation left a wet ring on the table. He noticed. His jaw clenched, and his eyes darkened. I realized then that this wasn't about a drink. It was about control, about me not doing what he expected. He asked if I didn't trust him. That question landed heavy. I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how to explain that trust isn't something you earn by ordering for someone without asking. I just shook my head and said I was drinking it. His mood shifted again, this time colder. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, watching me like I had disappointed him. The bar suddenly felt smaller. The music felt louder. I looked around, noticing how far away the bartender was, how the other patrons were absorbed in their own conversations. No one was watching us. No one would notice anything off unless it became obvious. That realization made my skin crawl. He suggested getting another drink instead, but only if I finished the first one. He kept bringing it back to that glass. I noticed he never touched his own drink, just kept it near his hand. I wondered how long it had been sitting there. I wondered if he had watched the bartender pour mine, or if it had come from somewhere else. My thoughts spiraled fast, and I had to force myself to stay calm. I told him I needed some water. He rolled his eyes, clearly offended. The bartender brought a glass of water over, setting it down between us. I wrapped my hands around it, feeling the coolness ground me a little. He stared at the water, then back at his untouched drink, then at mine. It felt like a silent standoff. Minutes passed like that, tension thick enough to taste. He started tapping his fingers on the table, the sound sharp and rhythmic. Every tap made my nerves jump. I checked my phone, pretending to scroll, but really I was counting time, waiting for a moment where leaving wouldn't cause a scene. Then he leaned in closer than before. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that his presence filled my space. His face was tight with frustration. He told me it was making this weird, that no one else would have a problem with it, that I was overthinking. Hearing that made something click in my head. This was going to get better. I stood up, saying I needed to go. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. His reaction was immediate again. He stood too, chair scraping loudly against the floor. People glanced over. He looked embarrassed now, not concerned, like I had ruined something he expected to control. He reached for the glass. I don't know why. Maybe to move it. Maybe to prove a point. But seeing his hand wrap around it sent a jolt through me. I grabbed my bag and stepped away from the table, creating distance without fully turning my back on him. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I walked toward the door, not running, but not slow either. Every step felt deliberate, like I was moving through water. I half expected him to follow me out, to grab my arm, to say something loud. He did. He stayed there, standing by the table, staring at the glass like it had betrayed him. Outside, the air felt sharp and clean compared to the bar. My hands were shaking as I unlocked my phone. I walked down the sidewalk fast, not stopping until I reached the corner. When I looked back, the bar door was still closed. He never came out. Later that night, safe in my live, I replayed everything over and over. The way he ordered without asking. The way his mood shifted the moment I said no. The way the glass sat there, untouched, like it was waiting for something. I realized how close I came to ignoring my instincts just to keep things smooth. That scared me more than his anger. I blocked his number before he could text. I poured myself a drink from my own fridge and didn't touch it. I just let it sit on the counter, staring at it, thinking about how something so small could carry so much weight. Nothing dramatic happened after that. No messages. No follow-ups. Just the memory of a glass I refused and a night that could have gone very differently if I had. The weirdest part is that I was in a good mood before it happened. Not excited, not hopeful, just calm in a way I don't usually feel before meeting someone new. I remember thinking that even if it sucked, at least I got out of the house. I had been stuck in my room most of the week, scrolling until my eyes hurt, feeling like my life was paused while everyone else kept moving. This date felt like motion, harmless motion. We met at a late-night dessert place that stayed open way too late for how quiet it always was. All white walls, metal stools, and a glass counter full of stuff that looked better than it tasted. The kind of place people go just to kill time. I got there first and sat near the window, watching cars pass and trying to guess which one would be hers. When she walked in, I recognized her right away. Same hair, same clothes as her pics, same half smile like she already knew how the night would go. We ordered, sat down, and things were normal for a while. Boring normal. Talking about school, work, random stuff we both claimed to like, but didn't care that much about. I made a dumb joke at some point. Nothing edgy, nothing smart. Just something to fill the silence. She laughed, but not fully. More like she noticed the shape of the joke instead of the joke itself. A few minutes later, she pulled her phone out and asked me to say it again. I thought she was kidding. I kind of smiled and repeated it, already feeling awkward. She stopped me halfway and said I said it wrong. She adjusted one word and told me to try again. I remember feeling confused but also weirdly cooperative, like when someone tells you your zipper is down and you just fix it without thinking. Then I noticed she was recording. Her phone was angled toward me, camera on, red dot in the corner. She didn't ask first. She didn't explain. She just held it there, watching the screen more than my face. She told me to say it again, slower this time. My chest tightened. I laughed it off and said I didn't really feel like being recorded. She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. She told me it was just for her, that she liked capturing moments. She said the joke was funny, but only if it was worded right. I felt stupid sitting there, the spoon in my hand hovering over melted ice cream, my brain trying to decide if this was a red flag or just a weird personality thing. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to be rude, so I tried again. She stopped me again, corrected another word, told me my tone was off, said I sounded sarcastic when it needed to sound natural. Every correction made my stomach sink a little more. I started to feel like I was being shaped into something. Like I wasn't telling a joke anymore, just repeating lines until she liked the version of me she was recording. The place was quiet enough that I could hear the hum of the freezer behind the counter. Every time she stopped me, that hum felt louder. I glanced around, hoping someone would notice how strange this looked. No one did. The guy behind the counter was busy wiping the same spot over and over. The other couple in the corner was deep in their own world. She kept the camera on the whole time. I asked her why she needed it recorded. She got defensive fast. Said I was overthinking. Said everyone records everything now. Said if I wasn't comfortable, then maybe I shouldn't have said the joke in the first place. That last part can be hard. It twisted things around so suddenly that I almost believed her. Like I had done something wrong by speaking at all. I tried one more time. I don't even remember what the joke was anymore. I just remember focusing on her face, waiting for approval. She stopped me again, sighed loudly, and leaned closer. She told me to emphasize a certain word. To pause before the ending. To smile less. I felt like I was being directed in a low-budget video I'd never agreed to be in. My heart was racing, not in a scared way at first, more like embarrassment mixed with pressure. But then I started thinking about where that video could go. Who else might see it? How easy it would be to cut it, edit it, make it sound like something else entirely. She had full control of the recording. I had none. I told her I was done. I said I didn't want to do it anymore. She didn't turn the camera off. She frowned, annoyed, and said I was ruining the moment. She asked me why I was being so stiff. She said it was supposed to be fun. Her voice had that edge now, like she was losing patience. I noticed then that she had a small folder open on her phone behind the recording screen, thumbnails of other videos, faces I didn't recognize, all framed the same way, sitting across from her, lit by the same overhead lights. My throat went dry. I asked who else she recorded. She shrugged and said just people she liked. That answer made my skin crawl. Liking someone shouldn't feel like this. It shouldn't feel like being collected. She finally turned the camera off, but she didn't put the phone away. She watched me like she was waiting for something. An apology, maybe. I grabbed my bag and stood up. My legs felt shaky like I had stood up too fast, but I forced myself to stay steady. She laughed and said I was being sensitive. Said I would regret leaving over something so small. I didn't answer. I walked toward the door, my ears ringing, my face hot. I pushed the door open and stepped into the cold night air, breathing like I had just run. I didn't stop walking until I was halfway down the block. My phone buzzed. A message from her. I didn't open it. Then another. Then another. I turned my phone off completely. I stood under a streetlight, staring at the pavement, replaying the way she looked at me through her screen. Not like a person, like material. When I got back to my live, I sat on my bed fully dressed, heart still pounding. I kept thinking about those other videos. How many there were. What she did with them. Whether the people in them knew. Whether they were told they said something wrong too. The next day, curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone back on and checked her profile. It was gone. Unmatched. Like she never existed. That scared me more than if she had kept messaging. It meant she didn't need me anymore. She already had what she wanted. Sometimes I think about that joke and how many versions of it exist now. The one I told, the one she corrected, the final one she was satisfied with. I wonder which one she kept. I wonder where it is now. Nothing dramatic happened after that. No threats. No exposure. Just the feeling that I had been recorded into someone else's story without my consent. And that feeling hasn't really left. I still remember the exact second my stomach dropped, and it wasn't loud or dramatic, just this quiet internal click like something slipping out of place. I had that rare good mood that sneaks up on you when you least expect it, where you feel almost normal about meeting someone new. I wasn't hyped. I wasn't anxious, just floating through the day thinking maybe this one would be forgettable in a good way. I didn't know I was about to get a memory that sticks no matter how hard I try to shake it. We met at a casual noodle place tucked under an apartment building, the kind of spot with foggy windows and a floor that always feels slightly sticky. It smelled like broth and fried onions, and the lights were bright enough to show everything but still somehow missed the corners. It was early evening, not busy yet, and that made it feel calmer. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table near the wall, phone face down, hands folded like he was waiting for an interview. He looked normal, average, the kind of guy you wouldn't notice twice if you passed him on the street. That made me relax more than I should have. We ordered, sat down, and started talking. It wasn't amazing, but it wasn't bad either. Just that steady back and forth that fills time. I remember thinking this would probably end with a polite goodbye and nothing else. Halfway through eating, I felt that sudden urge to use the bathroom. I didn't think twice about it. I grabbed my bag, slid my phone out, and set it on the table without even looking at the screen. I wasn't hiding anything. I wasn't being careful. I trusted the situation because it felt normal. The bathroom was at the back of the restaurant, down a narrow hallway with flickering lights. It smelled like cleaner and old pipes. I washed my hands longer than necessary, staring at my reflection, adjusting my hair, doing that thing where you check your face for signs of awkwardness. I remember thinking I should probably head back before the food got cold. When I walked back into the main room, the first thing I noticed was my chair slightly pushed in. The second thing was him leaning forward. The third thing was my phone in his hands. He was just holding it. He was scrolling. His thumb moved in slow, deliberate swipes, eyes focused, jaw relaxed. My screen was lit up bright, showing content that was never meant for him. Messages, photos, notifications popping in and out. My heart slammed so hard I felt dizzy for a second. I stopped walking without realizing it, just stood there like my feet forgot how to move. He didn't notice me right away. That part messed with me the most. He was so comfortable, so unbothered, like this was something he did all the time, like this was the line he even recognized. When he finally looked up and saw me, his expression didn't change much. No panic, no guilt, just mild surprise like I had come back earlier than expected. He tilted the phone slightly, not even trying to hide what he was doing. My brain screamed at me to say something, to react, but my body lagged behind. I walked back to the table and reached for my phone. He didn't pull away immediately. His fingers lingered for a second too long before he handed it back. I could feel the heat from his hands on the screen. My hands were shaking as I took it, and I locked it instantly, even though it was already too late. He brushed it off like it was nothing, like he had just checked the time, like my entire digital life had been open to him for who knows how long. He acted confused about why I looked upset, like I was the one breaking some invisible rule. My head was spinning. I tried to think about what he could have seen. Messages with friends, old photos, notes I never meant to share, notifications from apps that say more than you want them to. My privacy felt ripped open, inspected, then casually set back on the table. I asked why he did it. My voice sounded far away to my own ears. He shrugged, saying my phone lit up and he was curious. That word made my skin crawl. Curious. Like curiosity justifies crossing a line that big. I noticed then that he knew things, small things, details he shouldn't have known. He mentioned a friend by name, referenced something from a message that had popped up. Not directly, but enough that I knew he had seen it. Every mention felt like a needle. I pushed my bowl away, appetite completely gone. The restaurant suddenly felt too bright, too open. I could hear every sound now, slurping, plates clinking, chairs scraping. No one was paying attention to us, and that made it worse. This had happened in plain sight, and no one noticed. He kept talking, acting like nothing was wrong, like we could just continue the date. His tone didn't change, but his eyes did. There was something there now, something assessing. Like he'd had gained access to a new version of me and was adjusting his expectations. I realized then how vulnerable that moment had been, how easy it was. One bathroom break, one unlocked screen, and suddenly someone I barely knew had pieces of my life that took years to build. It made me feel small, like I had been careless in a way I couldn't undo. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and told him I was leaving. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I just needed to get out of there before I lost whatever composure I had left. He looked annoyed, not apologetic, like I was inconveniencing him by reacting at all. As I walked toward the door, I could feel his eyes on my back. I expected him to follow me, to argue, to say something loud. He didn't. That almost made it worse. It meant he didn't feel like he needed to. Outside, the air felt cooler, heavier. I leaned against the building for a second, breathing hard, my phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline. I checked everything. Messages, photos, settings. I couldn't tell what he had opened, what he had scrolled through, how far he went. The uncertainty gnawed at me. On the walk home, every vibration from my phone made me flinch. I imagined him screenshotting things, memorizing details, forming opinions based on fragments of my life taken out of context. It felt like I had been watched from inside my own pocket. When I got back to my live, I locked the door and sat on the floor with my back against it. I changed passwords, turned on extra security, scrolled through my apps like they were suddenly dangerous. It didn't fix the feeling. Nothing really did. Later that night, a message came through from him. I didn't open it. I blocked the number immediately. I didn't want to know what excuse he had lined up, what version of the story he told himself where this was acceptable. Days passed, but the feeling stuck. I started keeping my phone face down, locking in obsessively, even around people I trusted. That one moment rewired something in my brain. It taught me how fast boundaries can disappear if someone decides they don't matter. Nothing else happened after that. No confrontation, no dramatic fallout, just the quiet knowledge that someone crossed a line and walked away thinking it was fine. And that knowledge sits heavy even now. I still think about how fast a room can turn on you, like how 1 second you are just another person sitting at a table, and the next you are something people are staring at like a problem that needs to be solved. That night started with me feeling weirdly hopeful, which almost never happens anymore. Not excited, hopeful, just that quiet thought that maybe this one would be fine. Nothing special, nothing awful, just fine. I didn't know how loud silence could get until it happened. We met at a casual place that served food in metal baskets and played old movies on a projector above the bar. The kind of spot people bring first dates because it feels safe and public. Lots of tables close together, lots of noise, lots of witnesses. I showed up early and picked a table near the middle of the room. Not hidden, but not right in the open either. I remember thinking that was a smart move, like I was already making good choices. She showed up a few minutes later, wearing a hoodie and looking tired in a relatable way. Nothing about her stood out in a bad way. If anything, she felt familiar, like someone I could have known for a while already. We ordered food, sat down, and started talking. It wasn't amazing, but it wasn't awkward either. Just the usual first date stuff. Work, random complaints, little jokes that didn't matter. I relaxed more than I usually do. That's probably why what happened hit so hard. About halfway through eating, I noticed her mood shift. Not suddenly, but gradually. Her shoulders dropped, her eyes stopped meeting mine, her hands started fidgeting with a napkin on the table. I thought maybe I said something wrong without realizing it. I replayed the last few minutes in my head, trying to catch it, but nothing stood out. Then she started crying. Not quiet crying, not subtle, loud, shaking sobs that cut straight through the noise of the room. Forks paused midair, heads turned. The movie playing above us suddenly felt way too loud and way too quiet at the same time. My heart jumped into my throat. I froze, completely unprepared for how fast the attention shifted. She put her hands over her face and cried harder, her shoulders shaking. People started watching openly now. Not glancing, staring. I leaned forward instinctively, panic flooding my chest, trying to figure out what to do. I didn't touch her. I didn't want to make things worse. I didn't even know what worse would look like. Through her crying, she started accusing me of something. Not clearly, not directly. Just vague statements about how I made her feel unsafe, how I knew what I was doing, how she told herself not to trust me. None of it had specifics. None of it made sense. But it didn't need to. The way she said it filled in the gaps for everyone listening. The room shifted. I felt it. The energy changed from curiosity to judgment. People leaned in slightly. A server slowed down nearby, pretending to wipe a table while clearly listening. Someone at the bar turned their stool to face us. I felt like I was shrinking into my chair. I tried to calm her down without saying anything that could be twisted. My brain was racing, trying to pick words that wouldn't sound defensive or guilty or dismissive. But before I could even fully react, she cried louder, repeating that she couldn't believe I would do that. That phrase echoed in my head. Do what? I didn't know what I was being accused of, but everyone else seemed to assume I did. I noticed phones come out, not pointed directly at me, but angled just enough to catch the scene. That made my stomach drop. This wasn't just embarrassment anymore. This was reputation. This was something that could follow me. I looked around desperately, hoping someone would step in, ask questions, break the moment. No one did. People don't want to get involved. They just want to watch. I realized then how alone I was in that moment, how fast a narrative can form without facts. She suddenly stood up, still crying, knocking her chair back. The sound was sharp and loud, like punctuation. She said she couldn't sit there anymore, that she needed to leave. She looked at me like I was something dangerous, something to get away from. The looks from the room followed her gaze right onto me. I stood up too, hands slightly raised, not sure what I was even signaling. I wasn't trying to stop her. I just didn't want to be left sitting there like a villain in the middle of a restaurant. She walked toward the door, crying the whole way, not looking back. People parted for her like she was fragile glass. When she left, the crying stopped abruptly, like someone turned off a switch. That silence was worse. Every eye stayed on me. I could feel it on my skin. My face burned. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might break something inside my chest. A server came over and asked if everything was okay. Their tone wasn't neutral. It wasn't concerned. It was cautious, like it was already something they needed to handle carefully. I nodded, muttered something meaningless, and reached for my wallet. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it on the table. A few people flinched at the sound. I paid quickly, not even checking the amount. It could have been $40 or $80 for all I cared. I just needed to leave. As I walked toward the exit, I felt eyes following me. Whispers started, not loud enough to hear, but loud enough to feel. My ears rang. Outside, the night air hit me like a wall. I stood there for a second, breathing hard, trying to steady myself. I expected her to be waiting outside, maybe still crying, maybe ready to say something else. She was there. The sidewalk was empty. I checked my phone immediately. No messages, no missed calls, nothing. It was like she vanished the second she walked out. That scared me more than if she had yelled at me again. It meant she got exactly what she wanted. I walked home with my hood up, replaying everything over and over. Every word she said, every look from the room. I kept thinking about how vague her accusations were, how that almost made them stronger. People fill in the blanks with their worst assumptions. I imagined someone from the restaurant posting about it later. A guy making a girl cry. A warning. A story without context. When I got back to my lib, I locked the door and sat on the couch in the dark. I didn't turn on any lights. My phone buzzed eventually. A message from her. Just one. It said she hoped I learned something. Nothing else. No explanation. No clarification. Just that. I typed out a response about how confused I was, how none of it made sense, how I didn't understand what she thought I did. I deleted it. I blocked her number instead. I didn't want to give her more material, more words to twist. The next few days I felt different walking into public places, more aware, more careful. I caught myself watching people watch me, wondering if they could somehow tell, if that moment had left a mark on me that strangers could see. Nothing else came of it. No messages. No posts that I could find. No one confronted me. But that night stuck with me. The sound of her crying. The way the room turned. The way I couldn't defend myself against something that was never clearly said. It ended as suddenly as it started. No resolution. No closure. Just me walking out of a place where I had done nothing wrong and feeling like everyone believed otherwise. I didn't feel nervous when I left my live that night, which should have been my first clue that something was off. I usually get that tight chest feeling before first dates, like my body knows before my brain does that I might regret going. This time I just felt empty, like I was running an errand instead of meeting a stranger. I remember locking my door and thinking I would probably be back in a couple hours with nothing new to report. Just another forgettable night. We met at a small art bar downtown, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and paintings for sale on the walls that never seemed to get sold. It smelled like paint and cheap wine, and the lighting was low but not romantic, more like lazy. There was a long wooden table in the middle where people sat with laptops during the day and smaller tables pushed against the walls. He suggested we sit at one of the small ones near the window. I didn't argue. He was already seated when I arrived, leaning back in his chair, legs stretched out, like he owned the space. He smiled when he saw me, and it seemed genuine enough. I put my purse down on the chair next to me, set my phone on the table, and dropped my keys beside it without thinking. I didn't feel guarded. Everything felt neutral. At first, things were fine. Not great, not terrible. Just talking. I remember thinking he talked a little too much about himself, but that's common. He laughed at his own jokes, which was annoying but not alarming. I ordered a drink, he ordered one too, and we settled into that early date rhythm where you are still deciding if you like the person enough to stay. Then he reached for my phone. Not suddenly. Not aggressively. Just casually, like it belonged there. He slid it closer to himself with 2 fingers while still talking, not even looking down at it. I froze for a second, unsure if I had imagined it. My phone ended up right in front of him, screen facing up. He didn't unlock it, just tapped the edge with his finger. I laughed awkwardly and moved it back toward me. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to make it weird. He smiled and said something about liking to know what's around him. I brushed it off. Maybe he was just fidgety. Maybe it meant nothing. A few minutes later, he picked up my keys. This time I noticed right away. The soft metal clink made my stomach twist. He lifted them, turning them over in his hand, studying the keychain like it was interesting. He asked what the little charm was from. I told him, reaching out to take them back. He didn't pull away, just kept holding them, nodding like he was filing the information somewhere. He said he liked touching people's things, that it helped him feel connected, that it was important to get comfortable with someone's stuff if you were going to get comfortable with them. The way he said it made my skin crawl, even though nothing about the words themselves was technically wrong. I took my keys back and put them in my purse, zipping it shut. I told myself that was enough. Boundary set. Moment over. It wasn't. His eyes followed my hands as I zipped the purse. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, gaze locked on the bag like it was part of the conversation now. He reached out and touched the strap, running his fingers along the fabric. My heart rate picked up instantly. I pulled the purse closer to my body. This time I did say something. I told him I didn't like that. He laughed like I had made a joke. He said he was just trying to understand me better. That objects say a lot about a person. That he needed to get used to my things. The way he said needed made my chest tighten. I started paying closer attention then, noticing how his eyes kept drifting to whatever I touched, how he mirrored my movements just a little too closely. When I picked up my drink, he picked up his. When I adjusted my jacket, he adjusted his. It felt like I was being watched in a way that wasn't flattering or curious, just invasive. He reached for my purse again, this time lifting it slightly off the chair. My heart dropped. I told him to stop. My voice came out sharper than I meant it to, and heads at nearby tables turned. He looked annoyed, like I had embarrassed him. He set the purse back down slowly, deliberately, like he was showing me to comply if he wanted to. He told me I was tense, that I needed to relax, that if I couldn't handle something as small as him touching my stuff, then maybe I wasn't ready for a connection. I felt myself shrinking, that familiar pressure to doubt my own reaction. I hated that part of myself. The part that wants to apologize even when I know I'm right. I tried to steer the conversation somewhere else, asking about his work, his hobbies, anything. He answered, but his hands didn't stop moving, tapping the table, brushing against my sleeve, drifting toward my phone again. Every time his fingers got close, my body reacted before my brain did, pulling back, tightening. At one point, he picked up my phone again, this time actually turning it over in his hands. The screen was locked, but that didn't seem to matter to him. He commented on the case, said it fit my vibe. I reached for it immediately. He held it just out of reach, smiling like this was playful. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor, and conversation around us paused for a split second. I didn't care. I grabbed my phone from his hand and shoved it into my pocket. My hands were shaking, and I could feel heat rising in my face. I told him I was done. He didn't stand. He just looked up at me, eyes narrowing slightly. He said I was overreacting, that he was just trying to bond, that everyone else liked that about him. The way he said everyone else made me wonder how many times he had done this before. How many people brushed it off until it was too late. I grabbed my purse, slung it over my shoulder, and walked toward the door. I could feel his eyes on my back, heavy and focused. I expected him to follow me. He didn't. That almost made it worse. It meant he didn't feel threatened by my leaving, like this was a loss to him. Outside, the night air felt thick and damp. I stood on the sidewalk for a second, heart pounding, checking my bag compulsively. Phone, keys, wallet, everything was there. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been taken. Not physically, but something else. I walked quickly, not wanting to stay near the bar. Every person I passed made me tense up. My mind replayed the way his hands moved. The way he talked about my belongings like they were extensions of me. Like touching them gave him some kind of access. When I got back to my lip, I locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. I dumped my purse out on the floor, checking everything again, even though I knew it was irrational. I wiped down my phone with a sleeve, then set it face down on the table. Later that night, I got a message from him. I didn't open it. I blocked the number without thinking. I didn't want explanations. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want to know what he thought I owed him. The next few days, I couldn't stop noticing how personal objects really are, how much of ourselves we carry around without realizing it, how easy it is for someone to treat those things like invitations instead of boundaries. Nothing else happened. No confrontation. No follow-up. Just that one night and the way it made me feel like my space had been tested and poked and measured. Like he wasn't interested in me, just in what he could touch. I knew the night was going to be strange the second I saw the extra chair pulled up to our table before I even sat down. It was dramatic at first, just confusing. Like when you walk into a room and something is slightly out of place, but you can't explain why. I remember pausing for half a second, looking around the place, telling myself I was just tired and reading too much into furniture. I wish it had only been about the chair. I had agreed to meet her at a casual taco place near a bus stop, loud and colorful, and always half full. It felt like a safe pick. Lots of people, lots of noise, nothing intimate or quiet. I got there early, grabbed a table near the wall, and waited. I kept my phone in my pocket on purpose, trying not to look distracted. I wanted to give this one a fair shot. She walked in 10 minutes late, waving like she already spotted me. She smiled big like she was excited, and that helped me relax a little. She apologized in a rushed way, explaining she ran into a friend on the way. I assumed that meant she had talked to someone outside, and that was it. I didn't expect the friend to actually be part of the date. Before I could even respond properly, she gestured behind her and introduced a guy I had never seen before. He was already stepping toward the table like he belonged there. He didn't wait for an invitation. He just pulled the extra chair closer and sat down. That was when I noticed the third chair wasn't random. It was planned. He looked ordinary in a forgettable way. Plain clothes, neutral expression, eyes that didn't quite settle. He smiled, but it felt copied like he practiced it. I told myself maybe she just felt safer bringing a friend. I get that. I really do. But something about how calm they both were made my stomach tighten. We ordered food, all three of us, and sat there while the noise of the place wrapped around us. I tried to focus on her, but the friend kept leaning in slightly, like he was always just about to speak. When he finally did, it wasn't small talk. It wasn't friendly curiosity. It was precise. He asked about my work, but not in a casual way. He wanted specifics. Hours, location, whether I worked alone. Then he moved on to where I live. Not the area, the setup, roommates or not, floor level, how long I had been there. His questions came one after the other, no pause, like he was following a list in his head. I answered at first because I didn't want to seem rude. I kept things vague, hoping he would get the hint. He didn't. Every vague answer led to a more specific follow-up. He nodded along, not reacting emotionally, just storing information. She watched quietly, sipping her drink, eyes flicking between us like she was observing something unfold exactly as expected. I started feeling like I was being assessed instead of dated, like this wasn't about chemistry or connection, but about checking boxes. The friend asked about my daily routine, what time I usually got home, whether I walked or drove, where I parked. My chest felt tight, and I shifted in my seat, suddenly aware of how boxed in the table felt. I tried to redirect the conversation back to her, asking about her hobbies, her week, anything normal. She answered briefly, then looked at her friend like it was his turn again. He didn't miss a beat. He asked about my family next, who I was close to, whether anyone depended on me, if people would notice if my routine changed. That last one made my heart jump. I laughed it off, trying to keep things light, but my voice sounded strained even to me. I glanced around, hoping someone nearby would notice how weird this was. No one did. It probably looked like three friends talking. The noise of the restaurant covered everything. The questions kept coming, each one feeling more invasive than the last. He asked about my past relationships, not emotionally, but logistically. How long they lasted. How often we saw each other. Who usually ended things. Whether I stayed friends after. It felt like he was mapping patterns, not learning about me as a person. I noticed then that he never talked about himself, not once. Every answer he gave was short and empty, just enough to keep the focus on me. She barely spoke at all now. She just watched, occasionally nodding like she was approving his progress. I stopped answering. I told them I wasn't comfortable with the questions. I said it plainly, trying not to sound defensive. The friend tilted his head slightly, like he had expected resistance at this point. He smiled again, that same practiced smile, and said they were just trying to make sure I was a good fit. Not for her, just a good fit. Those words echoed in my head. A good fit for what? She finally spoke then, saying she liked to involve people she trusted, that she didn't want to waste time, that this was just how she did things. The way she said it made it clear this was negotiable. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the process. The friend leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and started asking about my boundaries. What I was okay with, what I wasn't, how I reacted when people crossed them. He watched my face closely as I answered, like my expressions mattered more than my words. I felt exposed in a way I couldn't explain. Not threatened exactly, but cornered. Like I had walked into a test I didn't study for and couldn't leave without failing. My food sat untouched in front of me, growing cold. I realized then that they were working together. The timing, the pacing, the way she stayed quiet while he pushed. This was her friend being weird. This was planned, rehearsed, maybe practiced on others before me. I pushed my chair back slightly, creating a bit of space. The friend noticed immediately. His eyes flicked down to the movement, then back up to my face. He asked why I was uncomfortable, not in a caring way, in a note-taking way. I stood up. Both of them looked surprised, but only for a second. She asked if I was serious, like I was breaking a rule. I said I was done and grabbed my jacket. The friend didn't stand. He just watched me, calm as ever, like this outcome was also on the list. As I walked away, I could feel their eyes on me. Not angry, not upset, just observant, like I was Data walking out the door. Outside, the night felt louder than it should have. Buses hissing, people talking, music leaking from nearby places. I stood there for a moment, breathing hard, my hands shaking slightly. I checked my phone instinctively, even though nothing had happened to it. I just needed something familiar to hold. I walked a few blocks before slowing down. My mind replayed the questions over and over, each one landing heavier now that I was distracted. I kept thinking about how easily I answered at first, how quickly I slipped into explaining myself to strangers who had no right to that information. When I got back to my live, I locked the door and sat on the couch fully dressed. I didn't turn on the tea. I didn't scroll. I just sat there, staring at nothing, feeling like I had avoided something without fully understanding what it was. Later that night, she sent me a message saying she was disappointed. Nothing else. No apology. No explanation. I blocked her without responding. I didn't want to hear what version of the night she told herself. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been studied. Not emotionally, but structurally, like they wanted to know how I worked, not who I was. It made me rethink every question on every first date I had ever been on. Nothing else happened after that. No follow-ups, no surprises, just the memory of that third chair and how it was never meant to be empty. I thought the night was going to end in the boring way most first dates do, with that slow mental countdown while you wait for the check and pretend you aren't already planning your escape. I even remember checking the time on my phone under the table and thinking I could be home soon, shoes off, scrolling, forgetting this ever happened. I didn't know the bill was about to turn into the most stressful part of the night. We met at a sit-down place near a row of closed shops, one of those restaurants that tries to feel cozy by dimming the lights too much. The booths were deep and the tables were heavy, like they were designed to keep people in place. I noticed that right away but didn't think much of it. He had picked the spot, said it was one of his favorites. That should have been fine. He showed up on time, which already put him ahead of a lot of people. He was friendly enough, talked easily, didn't do anything obviously wrong at first. I remember thinking he seemed very focused on the idea of a date, like he had rules in his head about how it was supposed to go. He asked a lot of questions about what I thought first dates should be like, what counted as a good one, how long they should last. I answered casually, not realizing how closely he was paying attention. We ordered food, ate, talked. It was bad, just heavy, like every topic stayed a little too long. Every silence got filled immediately. I started feeling tired about halfway through, that drained feeling where your social battery just drops. I slowed down my eating, hoping it would naturally signal that I was ready to wrap things up. The waiter came by and asked if we wanted dessert. I said no without even thinking. He hesitated, then agreed, though his smile tightened a bit. The waiter nodded and walked away. A few minutes later, he came back with that familiar question about bringing the bill. That's when everything shifted. Before I could answer, he waved the waiter off. Not aggressively, but firmly. He said we weren't done yet. The words landed weird in my ears. Not done eating would have made sense. Not done talking maybe. But not done yet felt bigger than that. The waiter looked confused but nodded and left. I sat there, fork resting on my plate, heart rate picking up slightly. I laughed it off at first, assuming he just wanted to sit longer. But something about the way he said it stuck with me. I mentioned I was getting tired. He nodded, but didn't respond the way I expected. Instead, he leaned back in the booth and said nights like this shouldn't be rushed, that dates had stages, that leaving too early ruined the flow. The way he talked about it sounded rehearsed, like he was explaining a system. Minutes passed. The table stayed uncleared. My empty plate felt like an accusation. I tried to signal again, shifting in my seat, checking my phone, saying I had an early morning. He acknowledged all of it, but didn't move toward ending anything. He just kept talking, steering the conversation back to heavier topics. Expectations. Commitment. What people owe each other after spending time together. The waiter came back again, this time holding the check in his hand. Relief flooded through me for half a second. Then he did it again. He told the waiter to hold on, that the date wasn't complete yet. He actually used that word, complete. I felt my stomach drop. The waiter looked uncomfortable this time. He glanced at me briefly, like he was checking for confirmation. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, my date laughed lightly and said everything was fine. The waiter hesitated and walked away again. I realized then I was stuck in a weird pause. I couldn't leave without the bill, at least not without making a scene. I can technically walk out, but that would mean confronting him directly, and I didn't trust how that would go. My mind started racing through options, none of them great. I asked him why he wouldn't just let the waiter bring it. He smiled in a way that felt patronizing, like I was missing something obvious. He said endings mattered, that you don't cut something off before it reaches the right point, that people rush too much these days and miss the real connection. I looked around the restaurant. Other tables were clearing out, chairs scraping, people standing up, coats going on. Our booth felt like an island that wasn't moving with the rest of the room. The lights seemed dimmer now, the music quieter. He started asking more personal questions again, but this time with more confidence. Where I live, who I lived with, how late I usually stayed out, whether I felt safe being out at night. Each question felt less like curiosity and more like justification, like he was building towards something. I told him I wanted to leave. I said it plainly. My voice shook just a little. He frowned like I had broken a rule. He said we weren't there yet. That leading before the bill came was rude, that he didn't want our first date to end unfinished. Unfinished kept echoing in my head. The waiter hovered nearby, clearly unsure what to do. I caught his eye and tried to signal with my face that I needed help. He looked away. I don't blame him. It's easier to step back than get involved. My heart was pounding now. I felt trapped in a way that didn't make sense on paper. I wasn't physically restrained. The door was right there. But socially, emotionally, I felt boxed in. Like leaving without permission would cause something unpredictable. He leaned forward, lowering his voice, and told me to relax. That nothing was wrong. That I was safe. Hearing him say that made everything worse. People don't need to announce safety when it exists. I stood up suddenly, pushing the table slightly. The movement drew attention from nearby tables. He looked startled, then annoyed. I told him again that I was leaving and that I wanted the bill. He didn't stand. He just stared at me, eyes hardened now, like I had challenged something important. He told me to sit down, not loudly but firmly. That was the moment my fear tipped over into something sharper. I didn't sit. I grabbed my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and stepped out of the booth. The waiter finally stepped in, asking if everything was okay. I said no. My voice came out louder than I meant it to. Heads turned. My date looked embarrassed now, his control slipping. He muttered something about people overreacting. The waiter put the bill down immediately. My hands shook as I pulled out my card. I didn't even look at the total. It could have been $30 or $70. I didn't care. I just needed it done. My date tried to say something else, but I wasn't listening. I sighed, stood up, and walked away without waiting for a copy. I could feel his eyes on my back, heavy and burning. Outside, the air felt unreal, like I had stepped out of a tunnel. My legs felt weak, but I kept walking. I didn't stop until I was halfway down the block. My phone buzzed with a message from him. I didn't open it. I blocked the number right there on the sidewalk. When I got back to my live, I locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. My body felt like it had just run a race I didn't sign up for. I replayed the moment with the bill over and over. How something so small had turned into a power move. How he used politeness and process to hold me in place. Nothing happened after that. No follow-up. No apology. Just silence. But every time a waiter asks if I want the check now, my chest tightens before I can stop it. I didn't feel scared walking into it, which is why it still bothers me. I felt normal, almost bored, like I was repeating the same routine I always did. Jacket on, phone in pocket, keys checked twice. I remember thinking that first dates were starting to blur together, that they were all just different lighting on the same conversations. I had no idea this one was going to stick in my head the way it did. We met at a rooftop cafe above a parking garage, one of those places that looks nicer online than it does in real life. Metal chairs, small tables, fake plants tied to railings. You could see the city from up there, but it felt distant like a background image. It was early evening, still light out, and there were enough people around that it felt safe. Public. Neutral. She was already there when I arrived, sitting with her drink untouched, phone face down. She smiled when she saw me and waved. Nothing strange about it. She looked relaxed, confident, like she knew how to take up space without trying. That alone put me a little on edge, but not in a bad way. I sat down and we started talking. For the first 20 minutes, everything felt normal. Boring normal. We talked about work, complained about the city, joked about how overpriced the place probably was. I remember thinking she asked a lot of questions, but I brushed it off. Some people are just curious. Some people carry conversations that way. Then she asked about my apartment. Not just where it was, but how it was laid out. At first, it didn't register as odd. People ask where you live all the time. I told her the neighborhood and said it was a small place. She nodded and asked how many rooms. I said 1 bedroom. She asked if the bedroom door faced the front door or the back wall. I hesitated for half a second, trying to picture it the way she wanted. That hesitation annoyed her. She rolled her eyes slightly and said it was a simple question. Her tone shifted just enough that I noticed it. I answered anyway, feeling weird about it, but not ready to push back. She asked if the windows faced the street or an alley. I said the street. She asked how high up I was, which floor, whether the stairs or elevator were closer to my unit. My stomach tightened. I laughed awkwardly and said she was being specific. She didn't laugh back. She said she liked details. That details mattered. She leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, eyes locked on me like she was trying to visualize something behind my face. She asked if my couch was against the wall or floating in the room. I hesitated again, longer this time. That hesitation clearly irritated her. Her jaw tightened, and she let out a short breath through her nose. She asked why I was being weird about it. I told her I just didn't usually describe my apartment like that. She frowned like that answer was inconvenient. She said she needed to understand the space people existed in. That it told her who they really were. The way she said needed made my chest feel heavy. I started answering more vaguely on purpose, saying things like it's pretty standard or nothing special. She didn't accept that. Every vague answer triggered a follow-up. How wide was the hallway? Where the bathroom was in relation to the bedroom? With the bedroom door locked? That one made my heart jump. I asked why she wanted to know all this. She looked annoyed, like I was slowing her down. She said she was just making conversation. That I was being defensive. That people who had nothing to hide didn't get cagey over simple questions. That flipped something in me. The implication hung there, unspoken but loud. Like my discomfort was suspicious. Like her curiosity was justified by my hesitation. I looked around the cafe and noticing how exposed the rooftop felt. The railings were low. The wind carried voices from other tables, but no one was paying attention to us. Everyone was wrapped up in their own dates, their own drinks. It hit me how alone you can feel in public. She kept going. She asked where I kept my spare keys, if I had any, if anyone else did. She asked about the locks, whether they were old or new, if the building had cameras. When I didn't answer right away, she clicked her tongue softly, clearly frustrated. She told me she didn't like when people stalled, that it made her feel like they were lying. She said she was trying to picture my place, and I wasn't helping. I felt like I was being scolded for not cooperating. My heart was racing now, but I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't want to escalate. I didn't want to make a scene. I told her I wasn't comfortable answering more questions about my apartment. I tried to say it casually, like it wasn't a big deal. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. Her eyes hardened. She said she didn't understand why I would agree to a date if I wasn't willing to be open. That trust went both ways, as she'd answered everything honestly. I realized then that she had barely shared anything concrete about herself. Every answer she gave was surface level. Job title, general area, nothing specific. Yet she expected a full map of my private space in return. She asked one more question, slower this time, like she was giving me a chance to redeem myself. She asked if my bedroom window could be seen from the street. The specificity of it made my skin crawl. I didn't answer. The silence stretched. She stared at me, clearly annoyed. People at the next table laughed loudly, breaking the tension for a moment, but it snapped right back into place. She finally scoffed and said I was wasting her time. I stood up. The chair scraped against the concrete, loud and sharp. She looked surprised, then irritated. I told her I was leaving. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I grabbed my phone and stepped back from the table. She told me I was overreacting, that I couldn't handle a serious conversation, that I was probably hiding something anyway. Her words followed me as I walked away, but I did turn back. Going down the stairs from the rooftop felt endless. Each step echoed too loud. My hands were shaking by the time I reached the bottom. I walked out onto the street and didn't stop until I was half a block away. I checked my phone. A message from her already. I didn't open it. I blocked the number immediately. I didn't want explanations. I didn't want to hear how she justified it. On the walk home, I couldn't stop replaying the questions in my head. Not just what she asked, but how she reacted when I hesitated. The annoyance, the pressure, the way she treated my boundaries like obstacles instead of limits. When I got back to my lib, I locked the door and stood there for a second, listening to the quiet. My place felt different. Smaller. More exposed. I walked through each room, noticing things I never thought about before. The angle of the windows, the position of the couch, the way the hallway narrowed near the bedroom. That night, every sound outside made me tense up. Footsteps, cars passing, someone laughing down the street. I kept picturing her trying to draw my apartment from memory, filling in gaps, getting annoyed at missing pieces. Nothing else happened. No follow-ups, no surprises. Just that date and the way it made my private space feel less private, like it had been measured without my permission. I knew something felt off before anything actually happened, and that makes it harder to explain without sounding dramatic. It wasn't fear right away. It was that itchy awareness you get when your body notices patterns your brain is still ignoring. I remember sitting on my bed earlier that night, scrolling mindlessly, telling myself I was bored of staying in and that anything was better than staring at the same four walls of my live again. I didn't feel excited, just restless. I didn't know restlessness would turn into something else entirely. We met at a small indie theater that also served food, one of those places where the aisles are too tight and the tables are shoved wherever they fit. It was dim, warm, and crowded in a way that makes you feel anonymous. I liked that at first. Lots of people, lots of noise, no pressure to talk constantly. He picked the place, said it was chill and low effort. That should have been a red flag, but I didn't think much of it. We got there early enough to get seats near the middle, not too close to the screen, not too far back. The aisle ran tight between the tables, barely wide enough for one person to squeeze through sideways. I slid into the booth first, and he followed, sitting on the outside edge closer to the aisle. Again, that felt normal, convenient even. I didn't think about how it positioned me until later. The date started fine. Not great, not awful, just conversation filling space. The movie trailers played quietly above us, casting flickering light over his face. He talked a lot, but not in an overwhelming way. I found myself nodding, smiling, doing the usual things. My drink arrived, then the food. Everything felt routine. About 20 minutes in, I realized I needed to use the bathroom. I shifted in my seat and leaned forward, getting ready to stand. That's when it happened the first time. As I moved, he leaned too. Not suddenly, not aggressively, just enough that his knee slid into the aisle space. I paused, assuming he would notice and move. He didn't. I hesitated for a second, then he shifted again, like he had just realized he was in the way and pulled his leg back. He smiled apologetically. I smiled back, even though nothing had been said. I squeezed past and went to the bathroom, telling myself it was nothing. Tight space, awkward timing. Totally normal. When I came back, the booth felt smaller than before. I slid in again, and he settled back into the same position, outer seat, leg angled slightly outward. I noticed it then, but I still didn't connect it to anything. I didn't want to be suspicious. I wanted to enjoy the night. The second time it happened, I noticed the pattern. I had just finished my drink and leaned forward to stand, intending to grab some water. As soon as my weight shifted, his leg moved again. Not blocking me fully, but enough that I had to stop. It was subtle, almost polite, like an accident you couldn't call out without sounding rude. I waited, he didn't move. I shifted back slightly, and then he adjusted, clearing the aisle with a small motion, like he had just realized. Again the half smile. Again that silent apology. My stomach tightened, just a little. I sat back down instead of getting water. I started paying closer attention after that, noticing how his posture changed when I leaned forward, how his body seemed to anticipate my movements. Every time I adjusted, he adjusted too. Not mirroring exactly, but intercepting. It felt like a quiet game I didn't agree to play. The third time, it wasn't subtle anymore. I told myself I needed some air and started to stand. This time, his knee slid out faster. Deliberate. It blocked the aisle completely. My leg bumped into his, stopping me mid-rise. The contact wasn't aggressive, but it was accidental either. It was too precise. I froze, half standing, half sitting. He shifted after a beat, acting surprised like he hadn't noticed. He leaned back, giving me just enough room to pass. My heart was racing now, but I forced myself to stay calm. I squeezed out of the booth and stood in the aisle, pretending to stretch like nothing was wrong. I didn't go anywhere. I just stood there for a second, watching him from above. His face was relaxed, unbothered, like this was all completely normal. I stepped back down. The movie started and the lights dimmed further. The darkness made everything feel closer. The aisle narrowed into shadow. I felt trapped in that booth in a way I couldn't explain. I wasn't physically restrained. The exit was right there. But the way he controlled that small space made it feel like I needed permission to move. I tried to focus on the screen, but my attention kept drifting back to his body language. How his leg rested at an angle. How his foot tapped lightly like he was ready. Ready for what I didn't know. About halfway through the movie, I leaned forward again, pretending to check something in my bag. His leg moved immediately, blocking the aisle. This time, he didn't move it back right away. He stayed there, knee out, foot planted. I waited, seconds stretched. Finally, he shifted, letting me move. The delay was intentional. I felt it in my chest like a dropped stone. I started feeling panicky, but I didn't want to react too strongly. I didn't want to draw attention. I didn't want to make a scene in a dark theater full of strangers. I kept telling myself I could leave any time. But every time I thought about standing up, my body tensed. The next attempt, I didn't even get that far. I leaned forward, and before I could push up, his leg was already there, faster than before. Blocking the aisle completely, he leaned into, crowding the space. I stepped back without thinking. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he'd hear it. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the screen, acting like nothing had happened. That was the moment I knew it was accidental. It wasn't clumsy. It wasn't coincidence. It was control. Quiet, deniable control. The kind you can't point to without sounding crazy. the kind that lives in inches and timing and plausible excuses. I waited for the movie to end, counting minutes in my head. My body felt stiff, like I had been holding myself too still for too long. Every time I shifted, his legs shifted. Always just enough, always blocking. When the credits finally rolled and people started standing, relief flooded through me. The aisle filled with movement, noise, witnesses. He stood up too, stepping into the aisle as everyone else did. The spell broke instantly. I stood quickly, grabbing my bag. My legs felt shaky as I moved with the crowd. He followed close behind, but he couldn't block me now. There were too many people. Too much motion. Outside the theater, under the bright lights of the lobby, I finally felt like I could breathe again. My chest hurt from how shallow my breaths had been. He acted normal. Chatted like nothing strange had happened. That almost made it worse. I told him I needed to leave. My voice sounded thin, but steady. He looked surprised, then annoyed, like I had disrupted his plan. He asked if everything was okay in that fake concerned way. I didn't explain. I didn't owe him that. I walked out into the night air without waiting for a response. I didn't stop until I was halfway down the block. My hands were shaking. I kept replaying the timing in my head, the precision, the way he always moved first, the way he always left himself an out. It felt calculated in a way that made my skin crawl. When I got back to my live, I locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. My legs felt weak. I sat on the floor for a long time, just listening to the quiet, letting my heart slow down. Nothing else happened after that. No messages. No follow-up. Maybe he thought it went fine. Maybe he didn't even register what he was doing as wrong. That thought scares me the most. Now, whenever I'm seated somewhere tight, somewhere with narrow aisles or boxed in chairs, my body remembers before my brain does. I notice who sits where, who blocks what, who moves when I move, and I never sit on the inside anymore. I didn't even want to go on the date that day, and that's the part that still annoys me. Not because I had a bad feeling, but because I felt nothing at all. I was tired in that dull way where everything feels flat, like you're just doing things because time keeps moving. I remember standing in my live, staring at my reflection, thinking this would either be forgettable or mildly annoying. I wasn't braced for something that would crawl into my head and stay there. We met at a board game cafe wedged between a bike shop and a nail salon. It was loud in a controlled way, all dice clattering and fake laughter, the kind of place that makes it easy to sit across from someone without really talking. I figured that was the point. We could hide behind a game if things got awkward. She picked it, said it was perfect for reading people. That should have stood out more than it did. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a long table with a stack of cards neatly lined up. Her phone was next to her, face up, screen on. She smiled, friendly, easy. Nothing about her felt threatening or intense. She looked like someone who posted memes and forgot to reply to texts. I sat down across from her and tried to settle into the moment. At first, it was fine. We joked about the games, complained about how overpriced the snacks were, laughed at how competitive people got over nothing. She watched me closely, but I didn't think much of it. Some people are just observant. Some people don't like silence. I told myself that was all it was. I noticed she kept tapping her phone, though. Not texting. Just unlocking it, swiping, locking it again. Every few minutes. It felt like a nervous habit. I didn't want to assume anything weird. We started a simple card game, something low effort. As we played, she asked questions. Normal ones at first. Where I worked. What my week looked like. What I liked to do when I was working. I answered easily, not thinking too much about it. Every time I answered, she glanced at her phone and tapped something quickly before looking back up at me. I joked about her multitasking. She laughed and said she liked keeping notes. That word stuck with me. Notes. As the game went on, her questions got more specific. Not personal in an emotional way, but behavioral. How I reacted when I lost. Whether I interrupted people often. If I noticed when someone seemed uncomfortable. She asked these things casually like they were random thoughts, but the pattern was there. Every answer I gave, she typed something. I finally asked what she was writing down. She didn't hesitate. She told me she was documenting the date. She said it like it was normal. like she was tracking expenses or steps. She explained that she was part of a private group that analyzed men's behavior on dates, that they shared notes, compared patterns, flagged red and green behaviors. She said it wasn't personal, it was research. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like I missed a step. I laughed at first, thinking she was exaggerating or joking. She didn't laugh back. She turned her phone slightly so I could see the screen. It was a notes app, filled with bullet points, not just from tonight, dates, times, locations, short descriptions, initials instead of names. One of them was mine. She said she didn't use full names for privacy. That was supposed to make it better. It didn't. It made it worse. It meant this was routine, organized, repeated. She kept talking, explaining how helpful the group was, how it helped women stay safe, how they can spot patterns early, how they could warn each other. She said all of this while still typing, her thumbs moving fast, efficient. I felt exposed in a way I couldn't describe, like I was being watched from outside myself, like every movement, every pause, every word was being turned into data. I suddenly became hyper-aware of my posture, my tone, the way I was holding my cards. I didn't know how much had already been logged. I asked if she told the men she did this. She shrugged and said most wouldn't understand. That if she asked permission, they would behave differently. That she needed authenticity. The way she said needed made my chest tighten. I realized then that this was the date to her. It was a test, an observation session. I was there to connect. I was there to be analyzed. She kept asking questions, even after admitting it. How I felt about splitting the bill. Whether I believed people deserved second chances. How I reacted to being challenged. Each question felt loaded now, like there was a correct answer and I didn't know what it was. I tried to deflect, to make light of it, but she wrote more when I hesitated. I could see it. Every pause became a note. Every shift in my seat became something to interpret. I looked around the cafe, suddenly aware of how many people were there, how many conversations overlapped, how anonymous I was in that room. She could write anything she wanted about me, and no one would ever know the context. I wouldn't even know what was said. I asked who else was in the group. She said friends, friends of friends, people she trusted. She said it was private, invite only. That didn't reassure me. It meant I couldn't see it, couldn't respond, couldn't correct anything if it was wrong. She mentioned that sometimes they revisited old notes, updated them, compared how men acted across different dates with different women. The thought of my name or initials popping up in future conversations made my skin crawl. I asked if she ever shared screenshots. She said sometimes, if something stood out. She said it casually like it was obvious. I wondered if my face was already saved somewhere, attached to a few bullet points and a rating. I felt small. Not powerless exactly, but stripped of control. Like I had agreed to something without knowing the terms. I kept thinking about how normal the night had felt at first, how easily I slipped into it. I told her I wasn't comfortable with this. I said it clearly. My voice sounded calm, but my heart was racing. She looked annoyed, like I had failed to see the bigger picture. She said this was why they did it, because men got defensive when confronted. That stung. Not because it was true, but because it framed my discomfort as guilt. Like if I had nothing to hide, I wouldn't mind being documented. I stood up. She looked surprised, then irritated. She asked if I was serious. I nodded, grabbed my jacket, and stepped away from the table. I could feel her watching me, probably already typing something else. Walking out felt like walking away from a version of myself I would never get to see. Outside, the night air felt colder than I expected. My hands were shaking. I walked a few blocks before slowing down, my thoughts spiraling. I kept imagining the group chat lighting up. Comments, theories, conclusions drawn from fragments of a night that barely happened. When I got back to my live, I sat on the couch and stared at my phone. I wondered if I should message her and ask to be removed. If that was even possible. If asking would just add another note. I did message her. I blocked her instead. I didn't want to give her more material. I didn't want my reaction analyzed too. The next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched retroactively, like my past behavior was being re-examined by people I would never meet. I caught myself overthinking everything I said to anyone new, wondering how it would look written down by someone else. Nothing happened after that. No threats, no messages, no fallout. Just the knowledge that for a couple of hours, I wasn't a person to someone. I was a case study. Sometimes I think about that notes app, about how many entries are in it now. How many people think they know me based on bullet points typed by a stranger on a first date? I didn't think the worst part of the night would be the moment I thought I was going home. The date itself had already been tiring, the kind of tiring that sinks into your shoulders and makes every smile feel borrowed. I remember checking the time on my phone and feeling relief spread through me like my body knew escape was close. I had already planned the ride home in my head. Open the app, wait a few minutes, get in done. I didn't know how quickly that plan would be taken away from me. We met at a late night juice bar near a park, one of those places that stays open because people like pretending they are healthier after dark. The lights were bright and cold, the floor spotless, the music too upbeat for how quiet it was. It felt safe in that artificial way. Clean, public, nothing lurking in corners. I liked that. I felt like I could leave any time. He seemed normal when I arrived, friendly enough. A little intense, but I told myself that was just nerves. He talked fast, asked questions, laughed a little too loud and at his own comments. Nothing crossed a line at first. I sat across from him, juice sweating onto the counter, listening and nodding, counting down in my head without meaning to. As the night went on, I noticed he kept checking his phone. Not in a distracted way, but purposeful. Tapping, swiping, locking it again. Every time I glanced down at mine, his eyes followed. I didn't like that, but I didn't want to make something out of nothing. I told him eventually that I was going to head out soon. He nodded, said that made sense, didn't argue. I felt a small wave of relief. I picked up my phone and opened the ride app, thumb hovering over the request button. That's when he leaned in slightly and told me my ride was canceled. The words didn't make sense at first. I hadn't even requested it yet. I looked down at my screen, confused, then back up at him. He was already holding his phone up, angled just enough for me to see a screen full of text and icons. He said there was an issue, that the area was too busy, that rides were being dropped. My stomach tightened. I checked my app. Nothing was canceled because nothing existed yet. I told him that. He frowned, like I was misunderstanding something simple. He said sometimes the app lagged, that it would show up in a minute. He said it casually, confidently, like he had done this before. I waited. Nothing changed. He suggested I put my phone down for a bit, said we both seemed tense, said it might be better to cool off before I left. The weight he said before made my chest feel heavy, like leaving was conditional now. I told him I was fine. I said I just wanted to go home. He nodded again, but didn't move. Didn't make space. Didn't do anything that indicated the date was actually ending. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and said rushing out wasn't safe. That it was late. That things happen when people are emotional. I wasn't emotional until that moment. I felt a rush of heat through my body, followed by that cold, alert feeling in my stomach. I checked my app again. Still no issue, still working. I tried to request a ride. My phone froze for a second, then loaded normally. I felt stupid for even doubting myself. He watched me closely while I did it. Too closely. I finally requested the ride. The screen showed searching. I felt a flicker of hope. Then he leaned over again and said it wouldn't work. Said he had already checked. Said the drivers around here were canceling tonight. Said I should just wait. I asked how he knew that. He hesitated for half a second, then said he talked to someone earlier. The hesitation was small, but it stuck out. My heart started pounding. I told him I didn't want to wait. I said I could stand outside if needed. He shook his head and said that was a bad idea. Said it was cold. Said I didn't want to be standing alone right now. He framed everything like concern, like he was protecting me from my own decisions. The ride app aimed. A driver accepted. Relief surged through me so fast, it almost made me dizzy. I held my phone up slightly, showing the screen without meaning to. His face changed instantly. Not dramatically, but enough. His jaw tightened. His smile flattened. He said drivers cancel all the time. Said I shouldn't get excited yet. Said we could just sit for a few minutes and see. He said it calmly, but there was something under it. Insistence. Pressure. The driver was 2 minutes away. I started packing up my things, sliding my bag onto my shoulder. He didn't stand. He didn't move aside. Instead, he reached out and touched the edge of the counter, placing his hand between me and the path out. Not blocking me completely, but enough that I had to adjust my angle. I paused. He apologized lightly, said he didn't realize he was in the way, but he didn't move his hand. He told me to sit back down, said it would look rude to leave so abruptly, said people were watching. I glanced around. No one was paying attention. My phone buzzed again. The driver was arriving. I told him I had to go now. My voice sounded steady, but my hands were shaking. He sighed that I was being difficult. He said it wouldn't hurt to take a breath first. Said I seemed worked up. Said cooling off would be better for both of us. The phrase stuck in my head, cooling off, like my desire to leave was a problem that needed time to settle. I stood up anyway. He stood too slower, positioning himself between me and the door, not fully blocking it, but enough that I had to stop short. The juice bar felt smaller suddenly, brighter, louder. My heart was hammering. He said I was misunderstanding him, that he was just trying to help, that I didn't need to run. He told me the ride would probably cancel any second now. It didn't. My phone buzzed again. The driver was outside. I stepped to the side, trying to get around him. He shifted with me, still pretending it was accidental. I felt panic spike sharp and sudden. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want attention, but I needed out. I said his name loudly, not yelling, but loud enough that it cut through the music. A couple people glanced over. His expression changed immediately. The control cracked just enough. He stepped back. I didn't wait. I walked straight to the door, pushing it open hard enough that it banged against the frame. The cold air hit my face like a slap. I spotted the car immediately, hazard lights blinking. I moved fast, not looking back. As I got in, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone onto the seat. The driver pulled away before I could even buckle properly. I watched the juice bar disappear in the window, my chest tight, breath shallow. Halfway home, I finally started to calm down. My phone buzzed. A message from him. I didn't open it. I blocked the number immediately, my thumb moving on instinct. When I got back to my lib, I locked the door and leaned against it, heart still racing. My legs felt weak. I slid down to the floor and sat there for a while, just breathing, replaying the way he said my ride was canceled like it was a fact he controlled. Nothing else happened after that. No follow-ups, no new messages. But every time I open a ride app now, I feel relief. I feel alert, like something fragile is being held together by a screen. I went into that night thinking I had already decided how it would end, which is funny now because I didn't realize how much that decision would matter to someone else. I remember standing in my live, pulling on a hoodie, telling myself I would give it 40 minutes and then leave if it felt off. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't hopeful. I was just trying to be efficient with my time, but dating was another chore to get through before going back to real life. We met a quiet lounge under a bookstore, one of those places that smells like old paper and citrus cleaner at the same time. It was low-lit and calm, the kind of place where conversations feel heavier than they should. She picked it, said it was neutral ground. I got there first and sat near the edge of the room, close to the stairs, without really thinking about why. Maybe part of me always plans exits. She arrived a few minutes later, confident and put together in a way that felt intentional. She smiled easily, slid into the chair across from me, and immediately made the space feel smaller. Not physically, just socially, like her attention had weight. I noticed her phone was already in her hand, unlocked, screen dimmed but active. She set it face up on the table between us. The beginning of the date felt normal enough, not great, not terrible. Just conversation moving along. Work talk, city complaints, the usual. She asked a lot of questions, but they weren't invasive at first. I answered without thinking too much about it. Every now and then, she glanced at her phone and tapped the screen, but I assumed she was checking the time or responding to someone quickly. About 20 minutes in, I felt that familiar drop in energy, the one that tells me I want to enjoy this more if I stay longer. Nothing bad had happened yet. It just wasn't clicking. I started thinking about my plan. Finish my drink. Thank her for coming. Leave early but politely. I mentioned casually that I might head out soon. The mood changed immediately. Not explosively, not dramatically, just a tightening in her posture. She leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing, like she was recalculating something. She didn't argue at first. She nodded, said she understood. Then she paused, picked up her phone, and turned the screen toward me. She warned me that leaving early might make things look bad. That phrase hit me harder than I expected. She scrolled a little, then showed me a drafted message. Not sent. Just sitting there. It was addressed to me. It was clearly meant for someone else. Maybe a group, maybe a person. I couldn't see the header clearly, but I could read enough of the text to feel my stomach drop. It described the date from her perspective. Not wildly exaggerated, but framed in a way that made me look dismissive. Cold. Uninterested. It mentioned me wanting to leave early. It hinted at things without stating them outright. The kind of wording that lets readers fill in their own conclusions. She told me she didn't want to send it. That she was giving me a heads up. That she believed in transparency. She said she would rather finish the date properly so nothing got misunderstood. My heart started racing. I stared at the screen longer than I meant to, reading the same lines over and over. It felt surreal, seeing a version of the night already written before it was over, like my choices had been anticipated and pre-labeled. I realized she wasn't warning me. She was negotiating. I told her I didn't understand why she would write something like that before the date was done. She shrugged and said she liked to keep notes while things were fresh, that it helped her process. She said everyone shared their thoughts after dates anyway. This was just more honest. It didn't feel honest. It felt strategic. I told her I wasn't comfortable with that. My voice sounded calm, but my chest felt tight. She sighed, like I was missing the point. She said optics mattered. That people talked. That leaving early sent signals whether I meant it to or not. She said she didn't want things to get messy. Messy for who, I wondered. She tilted the phone again, scrolling to another part of the draft. This section talked about her feeling uncertain, about mixed signals, about how she wasn't sure what my intentions were. None of it was technically false, but all of it was framed in a way that made me look suspicious instead of uninterested. I felt trapped in a way that didn't make sense logically. She wasn't threatening me outright. She wasn't raising her voice. She was just sitting there, calm, holding a phone with words that could change how people saw me. I started thinking about where that message would go. Who would read it? How quickly a narrative can spread without me ever seeing it. I thought about how often people believe the first version of a story they hear. I asked who the message was for. She smiled and said people she trusted. That didn't reassure me. It meant I wouldn't be able to respond. Wouldn't even know what was said. She told me it would look better if we stayed a bit longer. Finished our drinks. Maybe ordered something small. She said it would help the story feel complete. She actually used that word. Complete. That word again. I realized then that this wasn't about connection. It was about control. About managing perception. About making sure she walked away with the version of events she wanted, whether or not it matched reality. I looked around the lounge, suddenly aware of how quiet it was, how few people were there, how no one was paying attention to us. This was the public confrontation. This was private pressure. I told her again that I wanted to leave. I said it clearly this time. My hands were shaking slightly, but I kept them on my lap so she wouldn't see. She looked at me for a long moment, then looked back at her phone. She said she didn't want to paint me in a bad light, that it would be unfortunate if things were misunderstood. She said that with a soft voice, like she was offering help. I felt my stomach twist. The implication sat heavy between us. Stay or let the draft become final. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor, breaking the quiet of the room. She looked surprised, then annoyed. She glanced around, then back at me, like she was deciding whether to escalate. She lifted her phone slightly, not threatening, just present. I told her I was leaving and that she could write whatever she wanted. Saying that felt like jumping off a ledge. I didn't know what would happen next. I just knew I couldn't stay. She told me I was making a mistake, that people would ask why I left early, that she would have to explain. The way she said explain made my skin crawl. I didn't respond. I grabbed my jacket and walked toward the stairs. My legs felt heavy, like I was moving through thick air. I half expected her to follow me, to say something louder, to draw attention. She didn't. She stayed seated, already typing. Each step up the stairs felt unreal. My heart was pounding. When I pushed through the door and felt the cold night air hit my face, I realized how tense my body had been. My shoulders ached from it. I walked fast, not stopping until I was a few blocks away. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check it. I didn't want to see what she sent. I didn't want to know if the draft was still a draft. When I got back to my live, I locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. I sat down on the floor and stared at my hands, still shaking slightly. I kept thinking about how calmly she showed me that message, how prepared it was, how easily she framed the situation as something I needed to manage. Later that night, I did check my phone. There was a message from her. Short, vague. It said she hoped I thought about how my actions affected others. I blocked the number without replying. Nothing else happened. No posts I could find. No messages from strangers. Maybe she never sent it. Maybe she did. They'll never know. That's part of what sticks with me. Now, every time I think about leaving somewhere early, I feel that old tension. Like someone is already writing about it. Like my exit might mean more than just me going home. The night didn't feel dangerous at first, just slightly wrong, like when a song plays at the wrong speed and you can't tell why it bothered you. I remember thinking I was in a decent mood when I left my live, not excited, not nervous, just neutral. I had parked a little farther away than usual because the street was crowded, and I actually felt good about that. More steps meant more air, more space to think before walking into something unfamiliar. I didn't know that detail would come back to me later. We met at a casual place near a river walk, one of those restaurants that pretends to be relaxed with picnic tables and string lights, but still feels watched. Lots of people walking by outside, lots of windows. I like that. I like places where you can be seen if something goes wrong. I showed up a few minutes early, grabbed a table near the edge, and sat there scrolling without really reading anything. He arrived right on time, smiling, hands in his jacket pockets. Nothing about him stood out. Average in a way that felt safe. We did the usual greeting thing, sat down, ordered food. I noticed he glanced toward the windows a few times, but I assumed he was people watching. The Riverwalk gets busy at night. Conversation came easily at first. Not deep, not boring, just enough to fill the space. He joked a lot, mostly harmless stuff. I remember thinking this might actually be fine. Maybe not amazing, but fine. I relaxed a little, leaning back in my chair, letting my shoulders drop. About halfway through eating, he made a comment that didn't register immediately. Just a throwaway joke about parking. I nodded along without thinking. Then he added another detail. He mentioned the side street behind the bookstore. My stomach tightened. That was where I parked. I looked at him, trying to keep my face neutral. I had told him where I parked. I hadn't mentioned the bookstore. I hadn't even said I drove. I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe he parked there too. Maybe it was a common spot. Then he laughed and said it was easy to find my car. The words hit me slow and then all at once. I felt heat rush up my neck, followed by that cold, hollow feeling in my stomach. I asked how he knew where I parked, trying to keep it casual. He shrugged, smiling like it was obvious. He said he noticed me walking in from that direction. Said he remembered the color. Said it was hard to figure out. None of that made sense. The parking area behind the bookstore isn't visible from the restaurant. You have to walk down a side path, past a dumpster and a locked gate. I know because I walked it. I remember checking my surroundings, feeling slightly silly for being cautious. There was no way he could have seen my car from inside. I laughed awkwardly, the way you do when your body is alarmed but your brain is still trying to keep things normal. He kept talking, joking about how people don't realize how obvious they are. He said he was good at noticing patterns. He said it like a compliment to himself. I stopped eating. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he arrived early and walked around. Maybe he saw me get out of my car without me noticing. But the more I thought about it, the more the timeline fell apart. I arrived before him. I watched the door. He was there. I asked again, more directly this time, how he knew. His smile faltered for just a second. Then he said he'd like to get there early. Said he walked the area to kill time. Said he saw my car and thought it matched me. The way he said matched made my skin crawl. I felt suddenly very aware of my keys sitting on the table, my phone, my bag hanging off the chair, everything that tied me to that car, that street, that route home. I tried to change the subject, steering the conversation back to safer ground. He followed along, but his eyes kept drifting toward the windows. Every time someone walked by outside, he glanced up like he was tracking movement. I started feeling exposed, like the walls of the restaurant were thinner than I thought. A few minutes later, he mentioned my car again. This time, he described where it was parked in relation to the streetlight. My heart started pounding. That detail wasn't visible unless you were standing right next to it. The streetlight flickers. I remember noticing it because it made the area feel creepy. There was no way he guessed that. I felt my hands start to shake, and I folded them together under the table to hide it. I asked him to stop joking about my car. My voice sounded calm, but tight. He looked surprised and amused. He said he didn't realize I was sensitive about it. He said it was just funny. I did laugh. He leaned back in his chair, studying me now, like he was curious about my reaction. He said he liked knowing where things were. Said it made him feel grounded. Said most people didn't mind. I minded. I looked around the restaurant, suddenly counting exits, the door behind me, the path along the river, the parking lot on the other side. Everything felt farther away now. My body felt alert in a way that was exhausting. I told him I needed to leave soon. He frowned like that was inconvenient. He said the night was still young. Said we had finished our food. Said he thought things were going well. I stood up anyway, grabbing my bag. He stood too a beat later. He said we could walk out together. The idea of him walking me to my car made my chest tighten painfully. I said I was meeting someone. It was a lie, but it came out fast. He looked skeptical, then shrugged. He said he would head the other way anyway. I didn't believe him. Outside, the night air felt heavy. The river smelled damp. People walked past in pairs and groups, laughing, oblivious. I started walking toward the street, deliberately choosing a different direction than where I parked. I could feel his eyes on me even after I stepped away. I didn't look back. I walked 2 blocks before stopping, pretending to check my phone. My heart was racing. I listened carefully, making sure footsteps weren't following me. When I didn't hear any, I turned and took a longer route, looping through a brighter area before heading back toward the bookstore. As I got closer, my anxiety spiked again. Every car looked wrong. Every shadow felt like movement. When I finally saw my car, still parked under that flickering light, relief and fear hit at the same time. Nothing looked disturbed. No doors open. No one nearby. I unlocked it quickly and got in, locking the doors immediately. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit there for a moment before starting the engine. As I pulled away, I checked my mirrors obsessively. Every car behind me felt suspicious. I took an extra turn, then another, making sure I was being followed. Only when I reached a busy main road did my breathing start to slow. My phone buzzed. A message from him. I didn't open it. I blocked the number without hesitation. When I got back to my live, I parked in a different spot than usual and sat in the car for a long time before going inside. I kept thinking about how casually he said it, how he framed it as a joke, how easily information about me slipped into his mouth without my permission. Nothing else happened after that. No follow-up, no messages from unknown numbers, but the feeling didn't leave. Now, every time I park somewhere new, I take note of who is around. Every time someone mentions a detail I didn't share, my stomach drops before my brain catches up. I'd about joke about parking anymore. I'd about assume harmless intent. Some people collect facts the way others collect stories. And sometimes you don't realize what you've given away until someone hands it back to you with a smile. The scariest part was the argument. It was the moment I realized I was starting to doubt myself. Not in a dramatic way, just this quiet internal wobble, like when you step on uneven pavement and your body has to correct fast. I remember sitting there thinking I was tired, that maybe I had misremembered something small. I didn't know yet that this feeling was exactly the point. I almost canceled that night because I felt off in a boring way, not anxious, just drained. I remember standing in my live, tying my shoes slower than usual, telling myself it was probably better to go out than sit alone scrolling until midnight. I wasn't excited. I wasn't nervous. I just wanted the night to pass. We met at a small, all-night diner on the edge of town, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and buzzing lights that never fully stopped humming. It smelled like grease and coffee that had been sitting too long. I liked it because it felt neutral, nothing fancy, nothing performative, just a place to sit and talk. She was already there, sitting in a booth near the window, stirring a drink she wasn't drinking. She smiled when she saw me, friendly and easy, like someone who knew how to make first impressions feel simple. I slid into the booth across from her, set my phone down, and tried to settle into the moment. The first part of the date felt normal. Not great, not terrible. Just talking. I told her about my job, nothing detailed, just enough to explain what I did. She listened closely, nodding, asking a couple follow-ups. I remember thinking she was a good listener. That mattered to me. Then she repeated something I had just said, except she changed it. It was small at first. She said I worked nights. I did. I corrected her casually, assuming it was a misunderstanding. She laughed it off and said right days. I didn't think much of it. A few minutes later, she brought it up again, but different this time. She said I told her I hated my job. I paused. I had said it was fine. Boring sometimes, but fine. I corrected her again, still calm, still assuming this was nothing. She frowned slightly and said I definitely said I hated it. Something about the way she said definitely made my chest tighten. I laughed awkwardly and said maybe she misheard me. She shook her head, confident. Said she remembered clearly. Said she paid attention. That was the first time I felt that flicker of unease. As the night went on, it kept happening. She would bring up things I supposedly said earlier, but the details were off. Not wildly wrong, just twisted enough to change the meaning. She said I didn't like my family. I said I was close with them. She said I wanted to move far away. I said I had mentioned maybe switching apartments someday, nothing more. Every time I corrected her, she got more irritated. She started saying I was contradicting myself, that I kept changing my story, that it was hard to follow what was true with me. Hearing that made my stomach drop. I knew what I had said. I was sure of it, but the way she said it, calm and certain, made me second-guess the edges. I started replaying earlier parts of the conversation in my head, trying to check myself. Did I say that? Did I phrase it differently? Maybe I wasn't as clear as I thought. The doubt crept in quietly. She leaned forward at one point, eyes narrowed slightly, and told me she didn't like dishonesty. That honesty mattered to her. That first dates were about being upfront. The way she framed it made me feel like I was being evaluated and found lacking. I told her I wasn't lying. I said it gently, trying not to escalate. She sighed, like I was exhausting her. She said I was doing it again, insisting on my version instead of owning what I said. I felt heat rise in my face. Not anger, but confusion. I started to feel unsteady, like the ground in the conversation wasn't solid anymore. I couldn't tell if I was defending myself or arguing over nothing. She brought up something else. She said I told her I did like commitment. That one hit hard. I had said the opposite. I had said I took relationships seriously. I knew I did. I corrected her immediately, my voice sharper than before. She shook her head and said that wasn't what I said earlier. She said I was backtracking now that I realized how it sounded. She said it was okay to admit things, but not okay to rewrite history. Rewrite history. That phrase echoed in my head. I started feeling panicky, but I tried to hide it. I didn't want to look defensive. I didn't want to look guilty. I just wanted the conversation to make sense again. I told her maybe we were misunderstanding each other. She scoffed and said it wasn't complicated. She said she had a good memory. That was when I noticed something else. She wasn't misremembering randomly. The changes always made me look worse. more unstable, less trustworthy. Each altered detail pushed me into a different light. I looked around the diner, suddenly aware of how late it was, how quiet. A couple sitting at the counter, a server wiping the same spot over and over. The world felt far away, like I was stuck in a bubble with her version of events pressing in. I told her I didn't feel comfortable with how the conversation was going. I said I felt like she was listening to me. She laughed, not kindly. She said that was rich coming from someone who couldn't keep his own story straight. My heart started pounding. I felt that familiar urge to leave, but something held me in place. Part of me wanted to fix it, to clarify, to make sure she understood. Another part of me just wanted out. She brought up something from earlier again, this time something I knew for a fact I had not said. When I corrected her, she leaned back and crossed her arms. She said this was exactly what she meant. That I denied things when confronted, that it was a pattern. Pattern. I felt like I was being accused of something invisible, something I couldn't disprove because the evidence was her memory versus mine. And she was so sure, so calm. I started questioning myself more seriously then, thinking maybe I had spoken carelessly. Maybe I had implied things without realizing. The doubt felt like a fog creeping in, dulling my confidence. She said she didn't like feeling manipulated. That word landed heavy. She said she had dealt with liars before and recognized the signs. She looked at me like she had already decided something. I stood up. The movement felt sudden, even to me. The booth creaked loudly. She looked surprised and annoyed. I told her I needed to leave. My voice sounded steady, but my hands were shaking. She told me I was running away instead of owning my words. That leaving now just proved her point. That made my chest tighten painfully, like my exit itself was being rewritten before it happened. I didn't respond. I grabbed my jacket and stepped out of the booth. She kept talking as I walked away, her voice calm, almost instructional, like she was explaining me to myself. Outside, the air felt cold and sharp. I stood there for a second, breathing hard, trying to ground myself. My thoughts were tangled. I kept replaying the night, checking each memory, trying to reassure myself that I wasn't crazy. I walked a few blocks before slowing down. My phone buzzed. A message from her. I didn't open it. I blocked the number immediately. I didn't want more words. I didn't want more revisions. When I got back to my live, I locked the door and leaned against it, heart racing. I sat down on the floor and stared at the wall, replaying conversations in my head like rewinding a tape. I needed to hear my own memory clearly again. It took a while, but it came back. The certainty. The knowledge of what I said and what I didn't. The fog lifted slowly, leaving behind anger and relief and something heavier. Nothing else happened after that. No follow-ups. No public accusations. Maybe she moved on to someone else. Maybe she found someone who wouldn't question the rewrites. But that night stuck with me. The way confidence can be chipped away without shouting. The way someone can change the past just enough to make you doubt the present. Now, when someone tells me I said something I know I didn't, my body reacts instantly. Not with panic anymore, but with clarity. I trust my memory more than I used to. And I leave sooner. I didn't realize how fast a moment could leave my control until I watched it happen in real time. Not later, not after scrolling back through notifications, but right there while I was still sitting across from him, fork in my hand, thinking I still had time to decide how the night would go. That's the part that still messes with me. The speed of it. How quickly something private turned public without me even being asked. I left my live that night feeling weirdly optimistic, which almost never happens. Not excited, just open. I remember double checking my outfit in the mirror and thinking I looked like myself, not like I was trying too hard. That mattered to me. I wanted the night to feel low pressure. Just food, conversation, then home. Nothing that would linger. We met at a small ramen place near a college campus, the kind with long wooden tables and stools that wobble if you move too much. Steam fogged the windows, and the smell of broth stuck to your clothes. It was loud enough that conversations blended together, which made it feel safe. Anonymous. I like that. He was already there, seated at the end of the table, phone in his hand. He smiled when he saw me and stood up quickly like he wanted to make a good impression. Nothing about him stood out in a bad way. He seemed eager, maybe a little too eager, but I brushed it off. Nerves do that to people. We ordered, sat down, and started talking. It was fine. Not amazing, not awkward, just fine. He asked questions, listened, laughed at the right times. I remember thinking this might actually be one of those dates that fades quietly instead of exploding into a story I'd tell later. Halfway through the meal, he mentioned how funny it was that we finally met in person after talking online. I nodded, slurping noodles, not thinking much of it. He picked up his phone and angled it slightly toward us. I assumed he was checking a message. He took a photo. It wasn't obvious at first. No flash. No big movement. Just a quick lift of his phone and a soft tap. I noticed too late. The camera click sound blended into the noise of the restaurant. I frowned slightly, but before I could say anything, he was already looking back at his screen, smiling to himself. I asked what that was about. He said he liked capturing moments. I didn't love that answer, but I didn't want to make it weird. I figured he would show me the photo, maybe ask if it was okay. He didn't. A minute later, my phone buzzed. I glanced down without thinking, expecting a message from a friend. Instead, I saw a notification from a social app I barely used anymore. My name lit up the screen. Tagged. My full name. My stomach dropped so fast, it felt like my body lagged behind my brain. I opened it with shaking fingers. There it was. The photo. Me mid-bite, eyes half-focused, hair falling forward. Not a flattering candid. Just a moment I never agreed to share. The caption was casual, joking about first dates and noodles. Underneath it, my full name was tagged clearly, linking straight to my profile. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I looked up at him, trying to keep my face neutral, but I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. He was still smiling, watching me now, clearly waiting for a reaction. He said it was no big deal. Said he liked being transparent. Said people like seeing real-life moments. Real-life moments. I told him to take it down. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He blinked, surprised, like that thought hadn't crossed his mind. He asked why. That question alone made everything worse. I tried to explain that I didn't like my full name being posted, that I didn't like photos being shared without permission, that this was the first time we had met. He listened, nodding, but his expression shifted. Annoyed. Defensive. He said my name was already public, that I was tagged in photos all the time, that he didn't understand why this was different. The way he minimized it made my stomach twist. This was the misunderstanding. This was entitlement. I refreshed the post without meaning to. Already a few likes. A comment from someone I didn't know. My chest tightened painfully. Strangers were seeing me. My name, my face. Connected to him, to this place, to tonight. I told him again to remove it. This time, my voice shook a little. He sighed and said I was overreacting, that it was just social media, that it would disappear in the feed soon anyway. Disappear for who? I realized then that I had no control over where that photo went next. Screenshots, shares, saves, my name attached to it like a pin. I thought about my workplace, my family, people who didn't know I was here, didn't need to know. I asked him why he tagged my full name instead of just posting it without tags. He said it was respectful, that he didn't want to hide me, that he wanted to show he wasn't ashamed to be seen with me. The way he framed it made me feel sick, like my discomfort was an insult. I stopped eating. My appetite vanished completely. The ramen sat there, cooling, untouched. I could feel my hands shaking, so I tucked them into my lap. I didn't want him to see how rattled I was. I told him I was leaving. He laughed at first, thinking I was joking. When he realized I was, his expression hardened. He said I was making a big deal out of nothing, that he had already told his friends he was excited about this, that leaving now would make it weird. Weird for who, I wondered again. I stood up, grabbing my bag. The stool scraped loudly against the floor, drawing a few glances from nearby tables. I didn't care. I needed out of that space, out of his proximity, out of the feeling that my image was already somewhere I couldn't reach. He stood too, holding his phone. He said he would take it down if I calmed down. That phrasing snapped something in me, like my consent was a reward for good behavior. I told him to take it down now. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. That pause felt endless. Finally, he tapped a few times and showed me the screen. The post was gone. I didn't feel relief, because I knew that didn't mean anything anymore. Outside, the air felt cold and sharp against my skin. I walked fast, not looking back. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. Another notification. Someone had followed me, probably from the tag before it disappeared. My heart sank. I kept walking, turning corners without thinking, just putting distance between me and the restaurant. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios. How long had the post been up? Who saw it? Who saved it? Who shared it before it vanished? When I finally slowed down, I leaned against a brick wall and took a few deep breaths. My hands were shaking badly now. I checked my privacy settings, locking things down as fast as I could, switching things to private, removing old tags. It felt like closing doors after someone had already walked through. I made it back to my lib on autopilot, locking the door behind me and leaning against it like my legs might give out. I slid down onto the floor, phone still in my hand, staring at the blank screen. Later that night, a message came through from him. I didn't open it. I blocked the number immediately. I didn't want explanations. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want him to think he still had access to me in any form. Over the next few days, I noticed little things. Random profile views. A friend asking casually how my date went because they saw something before it disappeared. That hurt the most. Knowing the moment had already escaped, already been interpreted by others without my input. Nothing dramatic happened after that. No threats. No public fallout. But the damage was quieter and deeper. The feeling that my image, my name, my presence could be taken and shared without my permission. All wrapped in a smile and a joke. Now, whenever someone reaches for their phone on a date, my body reacts before my brain does. I sit straighter. I angle away. I guard my name like it's something fragile. Because once it's out there, you don't get to decide where it goes next. I didn't realize how much effort I was putting into staying calm until someone told me it was a wrong response. That was the moment the night tipped from awkward into something that stuck with me long after. Up until then, I thought I was just having another slightly off first date, the kind where the vibe never settles and you spend most of it adjusting yourself to match the other person. I didn't know I was being measured the whole time. I almost skipped a date because I was tired in that empty way that makes everything feel heavier than it should. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed in my live, tying my shoes slowly, staring at the wall like it might give me a reason to cancel. I went anyway because I didn't have a good excuse not to. I told myself it was just coffee, just an hour, just something to do. We met at a late evening cafe near a transit stop, all glass windows and hard chairs, the kind of place where conversations echo a little too much. I picked a table near the middle without thinking. She arrived on time, confident, scanning the room before spotting me. She smiled like she already knew how things would go. That should have bothered me more than it did. The first few minutes felt fine. Not easy, but manageable. She asked questions fast, one after another, barely pausing between them. Nothing inappropriate at first, just personal enough to feel intentional. I answered honestly, keeping my tone even, trying not to overshare. I noticed she watched my face closely when I spoke, like she was more interested in my reactions than my words. She started pushing a little after that, interrupting me, correcting small details, questioning my answers. When I clarified, she smiled like I had confirmed something for her. I felt my shoulders tighten, but I kept my voice calm. I didn't want to turn it into a thing. She tested boundaries in quiet ways, showing up late to see if I commented, checking her phone while I was talking, letting silences stretch just long enough to feel uncomfortable. I adapted without thinking, filling gaps, softening statements, staying agreeable. I thought I was just being polite. Halfway through, she changed the topic suddenly and asked how I handled stress. Not in a general way, but specific. How I reacted when people pushed me. How I felt about being challenged. Whether I stayed calm when others didn't. I answered carefully, saying I tried to stay level-headed. I said I didn't like escalating things. I thought that was a good answer. She nodded slowly, eyes focused, like she was logging something internally. The longer we sat there, the more I felt like I was on uneven ground. Every response felt like it carried weight I couldn't see. When I laughed something off, she looked disappointed. When I stayed neutral, she leaned in more. I started feeling tense without knowing why. Then she did something that made my chest tighten hard. She accused me of being distant. It came out of nowhere. She said I was guarded, that I wasn't reacting enough, that it felt like she was talking at me instead of with me. I apologized instinctively, even though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. I said I was just trying to be respectful. She smiled again, but this time it felt different, satisfied. She told me she liked to see how people handled pressure early on. She said it saved time. I laughed awkwardly, assuming she was exaggerating. She didn't laugh back. She leaned forward, lowering her voice slightly, and told me the date was meant to be a test. That word hung there heavy and ugly. She explained that she intentionally created tension, that she pushed buttons on purpose, that she watched how men responded when things felt uncomfortable. She said she believed you learned more about someone under pressure than when everything was smooth. My stomach dropped. I asked what she meant by test, trying to keep my tone neutral even as my heart started racing. She explained calmly that she rated reactions, whether someone got defensive, whether they shut down, whether they pushed back or tried too hard to please. I realized then that every moment of the night had been engineered. The interruptions, the awkward pauses, the subtle criticism. None of it was accidental. She looked at me for a long moment, then told me I had failed. The word landed like a slap. She said I gave in too easily, that I tried to smooth things over instead of standing my ground, that it suggested weakness. She said she needed someone who could handle more pressure than that. I felt heat rush to my face, followed by something colder underneath. Not anger exactly, more like disbelief. I had walked into what I thought was a date and found out I was an exam. I asked why she thought it was okay to do that to someone without telling them. She shrugged and said people act differently when they know they are being tested, that honesty would ruin the results. The way she said results made my skin crawl. I realized she wasn't upset. She wasn't embarrassed. She was just delivering feedback. She said she had done this before, that some people passed, that some didn't, that it wasn't personal. She said it like she was explaining a system she trusted. I looked around the cafe, suddenly aware of how public the space was and how private the moment felt. People talked and laughed around us, unaware that I was sitting there being graded by a stranger. I felt small in a way I didn't expect, not humiliated, but stripped, like my attempts to be kind and calm had been reframed as flaws, like my personality had been flattened into a score. She told me she didn't think we should see each other again, not because I was bad, but because I wasn't what she needed. She said it gently, like that made it better. I sat there for a second longer than I should have, trying to get my bearings. My thoughts felt scattered. Part of me wanted to argue, to defend myself. Another part of me just wanted to leave and never think about this again. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling heavier than they should have. I told her I was done. My voice sounded calm, but distant. She nodded, unsurprised, like this was the expected outcome. As I walked away, I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. Relief that it was over. Anger that my effort had been turned into something negative by design. That my calm had been used against me. Outside, the night air felt sharp. I stood there for a moment, breathing deeply, trying to reset my nervous system. My hands were shaking slightly. I hadn't noticed until then how tense I had been. On the walk home, I replayed the night from the beginning, seeing each moment through this new lens. The interruptions weren't awkward. They were intentional. The criticism wasn't clumsy. It was bait. The silence wasn't nervous. It was a tool. When I got back to my live, I sat on the couch and stared at the wall for a long time. I kept thinking about how easily I slipped into trying to accommodate someone who never intended to meet me halfway. How my instinct to stay calm became evidence against me. Later that night, she sent a message. I didn't open it. I blocked the number without reading. I didn't want more feedback. I didn't want to break down on my performance. Nothing else happened after that. No rumors. No follow-ups. Just the lingering feeling of having been put under pressure on purpose and told I wasn't enough for enduring it quietly. It took a while to trust my own reactions again, to remind myself that staying calm isn't a flaw, that not escalating doesn't mean I lack a spine, that being tested without consent says more about the person designing the test than the one taking it. Now, when something feels off early on, I don't push through it to prove anything. I don't try to pass tests I never agreed to take. I thought the night was ending in the safest way possible, which is quietly and without drama. I remember feeling that familiar relief in my chest as I stood up, the kind you get when you know you are finally allowed to leave a situation you have been managing instead of enjoying. I had already started mentally replaying the route home, keys in hand, phone ready, body shifting into exit mode. I didn't know one last sentence was going to stick to me harder than anything else that night. We met at a small tapas place tucked into a narrow street, all brick walls and low-hanging lights, the kind of spot that feels cozy until you realize how close everything is. Tables were packed in tight, chairs brushing each other when people stood. It was early evening, busy but not loud enough to hide conversations completely. I liked that. It felt social without being overwhelming. He was already seated when I arrived, posture straight, hands folded neatly on the table. He looked calm in a way that felt practiced. Not relaxed, not nervous, just composed. I told myself that was a good sign. Someone who knew how to be present, someone steady. The beginning of the date was fine. Not exciting, not bad, just fine. We ordered food, talked about surface level things, work, routines, nothing personal. I noticed he asked questions but didn't really respond to my answers beyond nodding, like he was collecting information rather than engaging with it. I brushed that off. Some people take longer to warm up. As the night went on, I started feeling like I was slightly behind an invisible line. Every time I laughed, he watched my face instead of laughing back. Every time I hesitated, he seemed to note it. Not react, just note it. I felt myself becoming more careful without knowing why, choosing words more precisely, adjusting my posture, staying pleasant. There were small moments that felt off, but nothing concrete enough to call out. He corrected me once about something I was sure I had said differently. He asked why I paused before answering a question. He commented on my tone when I disagreed with him about something small. Each moment on its own was nothing. Together, they formed a low pressure that never quite lifted. I checked the time halfway through and realized I had been there longer than I intended. My shoulders felt tight. My smile felt tired. I decided I was done. Not because anything terrible had happened, but because I felt like I was being watched in a way that wasn't curious or kind. I told him I needed to head out. He nodded immediately. No surprise, no disappointment, just acceptance. That alone should have reassured me, but it didn't. It felt like the moment had been anticipated. We stood up at the same time. Chairs scraped. People shifted around us. I grabbed my bag, relieved to be moving. I thanked him for the evening, already stepping away in my head. We walked toward the door together. The restaurant noise followed us, forks clinking, voices overlapping. I could see the street outside through the glass, dark and open and free. Just before we reached the door, he stopped. He turned to me calmly, not blocking my path, just standing close enough that I had to pause. His expression was neutral, almost gentle. He told me I did better than most. The words didn't make sense at first. I laughed reflexively, thinking it was a joke. He didn't smile. He said it again, slower, like he wanted to make sure I understood. He said I handled myself well, that I stayed composed, that I didn't react badly when things got uncomfortable. My stomach dropped. I asked what he meant, even though part of me already knew. He explained that he paid attention to how people responded to pressure, that most didn't last as long as I did, that some got angry, some got defensive, some shut down. He said I didn't. He told me that's why I wouldn't be contacted again. The sentence landed heavy and strange, like a door closing quietly behind me. He said it was the rejection, that it was an outcome, that he preferred to end things cleanly when he got what he needed. The way he said needed made my chest tighten. I stood there, half turned toward the door, half facing him, feeling that the floor had shifted. I asked what exactly he needed. He said clarity. He said information. He said he had enough now. I realized then that the entire date had been something else entirely. Not a meeting, not a chance to connect, a process, an evaluation. I was there to see if we liked each other. I was there to see how I behaved. He told me I should take it as a compliment, that doing better than most meant something, that it showed I had control. Control over what I wondered. My heart was racing, but my body felt oddly still, like I had gone numb just enough to stay upright. I looked around, suddenly aware of how public we were. People walking past, servers moving behind us, no one paying attention to this quiet, unsettling exchange. He stepped aside slightly, gesturing toward the door like he was releasing me. The gesture felt ceremonial, final. I walked out without responding. The night air hit my face, cool and sharp. I took a few steps before my legs started shaking. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if he was watching me leave like he watched everything else. I walked fast, then faster, until the restaurant was out of sight. My thoughts were loud and tangled. Better than most kept looping in my head. Not contacted again echoed right behind it. It was projection that bothered me. It was the implication that I had passed something I never agreed to take. That my calm, my politeness, my effort to keep things smooth had been turned into data. That my presence had been useful and was now dismissed. When I reached my car, my hands were shaking as I unlocked it. I sat there for a moment, breathing hard, staring at the steering wheel. My reflection in the windshield looked unfamiliar, like I had left a version of myself back at that table. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every red light gave my thoughts more time to spiral. I replayed the night from the beginning, noticing things I had ignored. The lack of warmth. The way he never shared anything real. The way he observed instead of participated. When I got back to my live, I locked the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. My body felt exhausted, like I had been holding tension for hours without realizing it. I kicked off my shoes and sat on the floor, back against the door, just letting the quiet settle. My phone buzzed once while I sat there. A notification from the app where we met. Unmatched. No message. No explanation. Just gone. I wasn't surprised. What stayed with me was anger. It was discomfort, the kind that sinks in slowly. The feeling of having been assessed without consent. Of being told I did well in a situation that should never have existed. Over the next few days, I found myself replaying conversations with other people, wondering how often I was being evaluated without knowing. How often calm was mistaken for tolerance. How often politeness was taken as permission. Nothing else happened. No messages. No follow-ups. Just silence. But that sentence stuck. Better than most. Like a score, like a category. Now, when someone treats a date like a performance instead of a meeting, I notice faster. When someone talks about outcomes instead of connection, I don't wait around to see how I rank. I don't need to do better than most anymore.